wanted to bring together government, industries, partners, and organizations to recover and reimagine as we enter the new paradigm. While technology will have a center stage throughout this summit, but really, technology is just the enabler. The most important and central to it all is our humanity, people in the forefront of battling this pandemic and forging forward together for our collective future. This season has brought to light new perspectives and spotlighted the tremendous potential digitizing processes can have in our lives. As we have seen, with enough determination, ingenuity, and innovation, no challenge is too great for the human race to overcome. Fortunately for us, we are hopeful as we witness different fabrics of society coming together and government across the regions revving the engine for digital acceleration. We're very honored today to bring to you messages from a few state leaders across our region on their national ambitions for a digital-led recovery.
Since the dawn of the internet age, life as we knew it changed by leaps and bounds. The digital way of life is no longer a trendy catchphrase. It is our collective reality. It therefore goes without saying that data is a new gold. The entire industries depend on it for growth, and opportunities abound for those able to tap into the huge global appetite for all things related to data. In this regard, Malaysia holds immense potentials to become a data hub in the region, owing to the growing availability of high bandwidth, ample space, competitive power tariffs, and now oncoming presence of hyperscalers. We are a small nation with big data ambitions, and the commitment to fiberize the nation with 5G bandwidth and install data storage capacity are just the beginning. As we chart that course, Malaysia fully intends to remain at the forefront of technology by using data to deliver improved services for businesses, increase economic productivity, and ultimately step up Malaysia's competitiveness. As always, government will lead by example. Firstly, in migrating 80% of its data to the cloud by the end of 2022. And this migration, and by having a government super app in the near future, we will go far in widening the data sets in order for the government to pull insights to identify societal issues and coordinate support for the needy.
ผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านผมมีความยินดีเป็นอย่างยิ่งที่จะได้แลกเปลี่ยนกับทุกท่านถึงความคืบหน้าของการตอบสนองการฟื้นฟูและการปฏิรูปของประเทศไทยเพื่อสร้างสังคมดิจิทัลที่ครอบคลุมในทุกมิติปี 2563 เป็นปีที่มีความท้าทายทั้งในประเทศไทยและทั่วโลกการระบาดใหญ่ของโรคโควิด -19 ได้ก่อให้เกิดความท้าทายอย่างมากแต่ในขณะเดียวกันก็ได้สร้างโอกาสใหม่ในหลายมิติเช่นการที่ประชาชนปรับตัวเข้ากับวิธีการทำงานรูปแบบใหม่มาตรฐานสุขอนามัยรูปแบบใหม่และการเกิดโมเดลธุรกิจใหม่ข่าวดีคือประเทศไทยของเราได้แสดงให้เห็นถึงศักยภาพในการรับมือและปรับตัวท่ามกลางสถานการณ์การแพร่ระบาดนี้ด้วยตัวเลขผู้ป่วยที่ควบคุมไว้ได้ในระดับหนึ่งและประชาชนยังสามารถใช้ชีวิตได้ค่อนข้างปกติขณะนี้เรากำลังเผชิญกับความท้าทายต่อไปนั่นคือจำนวนยอดผู้ติดเชื้อที่เพิ่มขึ้นเราจะทำทุกอย่างเพื่อผ่านวิกฤตระลอกนี้ไปด้วยกันพร้อมทั้งมีการเตรียมการและวางแผนฟื้นฟูหลังสถานการณ์โควิด -19 ผ่านพ้นไป เพื่อเป็นการตอบสนองและฟื้นฟูสถานการณ์การแพร่ระบาดรัฐบาลได้ดำเนินงานจัดสรรงบประมาณจำนวน1 ล้านบาทสำหรับมาตรการฟื้นฟูสถานการณ์โควิด -19 รัฐบาลได้ใช้ช่องทางดิจิทัลมาประยุกต์ใช้ในการบริหารจัดการแก้ไขการแพร่ระบาดในด้านต่างๆเช่นการแจกจ่ายเงินเยียวยาให้แก่ประชาชนโดยจัดสรรงบประมาณจำนวน600,000 ล้านบาทซึ่งที่ผ่านมาได้ผลเป็นอย่างดีมีการเข้าถึงอย่างรวดเร็วและโปร่งใสทั่วทั้งประเทศประชาชนไทยมีความพึงพอใจทั้งนี้รัฐบาลตั้งเป้าจัดหาวัคซีนเพื่อฉีดให้ประชาชน50 ล้านคนภายในสิ้นปีนี้นอกจากนี้ทางภาครัฐยังฟื้นฟูเศรษฐกิจโดยแก้ปัญหาภาคส่วนที่ได้รับผลกระทบหนักที่สุดก็คือภาคการท่องเที่ยวเรามีความยินดีที่จะแจ้งว่าประเทศไทยจะเปิดประตูต้อนรับนักท่องเที่ยวจากทั่วโลกอีกครั้งโดยมีภูเก็ตเป็นจุดหมายนำร่องแห่งแรกจะเริ่มต้นในเดือนกรกฎาคมนี้จากความสำเร็จที่กล่าวมาความท้าทายต่อไปของเราก็คือการวาดภาพยุทธศาสตร์การเติบโตในโลกใหม่หลังวิกฤตโควิด -19 ได้อย่างไรเมื่อมองไปข้างหน้าดิจิทัลจะเป็นเรื่องสำคัญอันดับแรกในฐานะที่เป็นปัจจัยสนับสนุนที่จำเป็นสำหรับทุกภาคส่วนของไทยเช่นเทคโนโลยี Internet of Things และระบบอัตโนมัติทั้งหลายที่จำเป็นต่อภาคยานยนต์และอิเล็กทรอนิกส์ซึ่งเป็นภาคส่วนที่ใหญ่ที่สุดของไทยดิจิทัลยังช่วยสนับสนุนการค้าการบริการและการท่องเที่ยวผ่านแพลตฟอร์มต่างๆนอกจากนี้รัฐบาลได้ลงทุนเพื่อพัฒนาโครงสร้างพื้นฐานดิจิทัลให้พร้อมสำหรับอนาคตได้แก่การระบุตัวตนแบบดิจิทัลเอกสารในรูปแบบอิเล็กทรอนิกส์และการชำระเงินแบบดิจิทัลเป็นต้นเราตระหนักดีว่านี่คือเส้นทางที่ดำเนินต่อไปสำหรับประเทศไทยและเรามุ่งหวังที่จะทำงานร่วมกับพันธมิตรเช่นการวางบทบาทของประเทศไทยให้กลายเป็นศูนย์กลางภูมิภาคอินโดจีนของ Data Center สีเขียวและบริการคลาวด์โดยการใช้พลังงานทดแทนเพื่อบรรลุเป้าหมายให้ประเทศไทยมีการปล่อยก๊าซคาร์บอนไดออกไซด์เป็นศูนย์ในช่วงกลางศตวรรษที่จะถึงนี้การดำเนินการตามเส้นทางสู่ความสำเร็จของเศรษฐกิจดิจิทัลอันใกล้จะมาถึงนี้จำเป็นต้องได้รับความร่วมมือระหว่างภาครัฐและภาคเอกชนเราตั้งเป้าให้ประเทศไทยเป็นศูนย์กลางของภูมิภาคสำหรับบริษัทนวัตกรรมและเทคโนโลยีซึ่งรวมถึงการเปิดตัวโครงการริเริ่มนำร่องต่างๆเพื่อดึงดูดผู้นำระดับโลกทั้งบริษัทเทคโนโลยีและบุคลากรที่มีความสามารถสูงการพัฒนานโยบายเพื่ออำนวยความสะดวกให้เกิดระบบนิเวศด้านนวัตกรรมตลอดจนปรับปรุงความง่ายในการประกอบธุรกิจในไทยผมขอย้ำให้แน่ใจอีกครั้งว่ารัฐบาลกำลังวางแผนการพัฒนาทั้งในระยะเร่งด่วนและในระยะยาวผมขอขอบคุณอีกครั้งที่ให้โอกาสผมได้มาแสดงวาระแห่งชาติด้านดิจิทัลของไทยในวันนี้และหวังเป็นอย่างยิ่งว่าเราจะได้ทำงานร่วมมือกันขอบคุณครับ
Digital technologies have completely transformed our lives. Our vision for a smart nation is one where technology empowers our people to live more meaningful lives, makes our businesses more competitive, and hopefully helps to build a more cohesive society amidst great diversity. Singapore has actually come a very long way in our digitalization journey. We've moved from automating processes and systems to providing integrated government services online for virtually everything. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a real stress test for all of us. In Singapore, fortunately, our recruitment of engineering talent and our consecutive investments in top-notch digital infrastructure allowed us to quickly deploy digital solutions. This included the entire spectrum, from the timely dissemination of verified, accurate information to improving the speed and efficacy of contact tracing. Technology also enabled our workforce to switch quickly to telecommuting and for our students to participate in online learning from home. We also made Trace Together, our national digital contact tracing tool, open source, so that other countries and organizations could tap into our source code to build similar digital solutions adapted to their own needs. Public-private partnerships are a very important way to drive digitalization and to better meet the needs of our citizens and businesses. I believe the government has to clearly articulate the grand challenges confronting society, build the necessary platforms to facilitate data sharing, and to promote digital collaboration. The private sector companies can then work with the public agencies to create new services for citizens and businesses in real time and to address real needs. One such public-private partnership is the Singapore Financial Data Exchange, SG Findex for short. This was developed by the Singapore public sector in collaboration with the Association of Banks in Singapore and the 7 participating banks. It is the world's first public fintech system to use a national digital identity and centrally managed online consent system to allow individuals to aggregate their financial information held across multiple government agencies and financial institutions. The private sector also plays a very important role in workforce training and development. Microsoft has been one such key partner for Singapore, providing training for Singaporeans as part of our SG United Jobs and Skills package that was rolled out to support Singaporeans affected by the economic impact of COVID-19. Microsoft is also one of our partners, working closely with GovTech for the Digital Academy, which seeks to raise the digital literacy of all our public offices. Microsoft is also one of the cloud providers for our government commercial cloud. Ultimately, all public-private partnerships must be built on open communications and trust between all the parties involved. We value your contributions and we look forward to our continued partnership. We look forward to more vibrant collaborations with tech companies like Microsoft in frontier research areas such as in AI governance, and to adapt these tech solutions in order to best serve our people's needs as we continue on our Smart Nation journey. We are privileged to be alive at these revolutionary times, replete with both opportunities and big, hairy, audacious challenges. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Satya Nadella, Mr. Brad Smith, Mr. Haris Ismay, and the organization committee for having me. It's an honor to be here with you today. Due to the pandemic, the past year has brought significant change in our modern history. But this has also been a period of tenacity, resilience, and hope. A few weeks ago, I met Connie, a humble shop owner in outskirts of Semarang, Central Java. Everyone in the neighborhood accessed a branchless banking service from BRI, a state-owned bank, at her shop. From money deposit or withdrawal, mortgage payment to mobile phone credit purchase every month, she facilitated over 15,000 transactions, earning commission more than the revenue of her small shop. One of her regular customers is an online shop owner. So, one Connie empowers others. All thanks to the product innovation powered by digital. So the summit's topic is close to my heart. I believe an empowered society of today and tomorrow is a society that embraces digital innovations. Digital innovation that is inclusive. Not only those in the big cities, but also people like Connie. digital innovation that covers all sectors of our life as a nation and as a society, in line with President Joko Widodo's Indonesian onward vision toward the acceleration of digital transformation. The Ministry of State-Owned Enterprise has met technology leadership as one of 5 priorities in our strategic roadmap, and a must in our drive to transform our state-owned enterprise to be a global players, the highest standard of transparency, accountability, and professionalism. We are now ranked 56 in IMD World Digital Competitive Survey in 2020, but with more than 70% of the total population use internets. The country now the 5th country in the world with the highest number of startup companies, and the government is committed to invest more than 30 trillion for IT service, connectivity, and digital services. We have all the potential to make digital society and digital transformation as a reality. We believe digital transformation is a key driver for economic recovery and transformation in the country in the wake of the pandemic. And with our state-owned enterprise driving 1/3 of the country's economy, we have to take the lead and make the necessary leaps in front. Tech and digital adoption has been implemented across almost all our industry cluster. Telkom now has data center, cloud, and fiber optic networks to support business activities of local businesses. Biopharma now use biotracking and biodetect for its integrated vaccine distribution. Fertilizer company now has a variety of big data and IoT-driven tools for its precision fertilizing and production. And our ministry developed Padi UMKM, an e-commerce platform to connect small-medium enterprise with our SOEs company so they can be part of our procurement programs. We also encourage all our state-owned enterprise to commit to digital transformation toward Industry 4.0 through the implementation of INDI 4.0 for SOE assessment. The message is clear. Digital transformation is the way forward. All this effort and our digital transformation journey requires strong commitment and also strong partnership with universities and public and private sector across the nation and, of course, the world. Only together we can bounce back stronger, build stronger, empower societies of today and tomorrow. Thank you.
It's truly heartening to hear the leadership and optimism coming from our national leaders. Thank you. As we officially kick off the summit, thank you to all the 46 global leaders for coming together with a common mission, here to empower our nations, our people for a new era, the digital era. And thank you to our invaluable audience for staying online with us over the next 2 days. It is our calling as leaders and together as a community to make a difference. Together as a coalition, the world needs us to bring our collective strength, assets, resources for a more resilient, equitable, greener, and sustainable society for all. As Satya said it, if you change the way you see the world, you can change the world you see. We have the opportunity to change the world. And with this, it is my great privilege and honor to bring on stage Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft Corporation, and Andrea Dellamate, President of Microsoft Asia Pacific, for our keynote fireside chat on empowering nations for a digital society.
Welcome everyone. We're excited to host you today for the first public sector summit in Asia Pacific by Microsoft. COVID changed the way we live and work almost overnight. And the last 18 months have been incredibly hard. And our thoughts and prayers go out to the countries and region that are dealing with the resurgence of cases. We know it wasn't easy to ensure the health, safety and well-being of people in your countries. We're heartened to see how quickly you've adopted technology whilst ensuring people are at the centre of your efforts in managing the crisis. And it's humbling to see how people, industries and communities have come together to respond to the pandemic. And who better to reflect on this than Satya Nadella, who said we've witnessed a second wave of digital transformation over the past year. Welcome, Satya, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Andrea, and thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you and in APAC virtually, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I want to start, though, by thanking all of the public sector leaders and government officials who have stepped up to serve their constituents and respond during these very challenging times. The situation in many countries remains dire, and at Microsoft, we're focused on using our voice, technology, as well as our resources to help support our COVID-19 relief efforts.
Satya, what must public sector do to accelerate their transformation in response to the pandemic?
Over the past year, we've witnessed a second wave of digital transformation, sweeping pretty much every company in every industry. Organizations everywhere are accelerating their digital initiatives to build both resilience as well as transform. Digital tech is now the new currency driving every organization's resilience as well as growth. We need to have that strong digital foundation for the public sector to succeed. In APAC, our commitment to the National Empowerment Plan spans digitization, security skills, as well as sustainability, resulting in increased digital growth, accelerated technical adoption, and protection of our most finite resource, our planet. In APAC, in the last year, we skilled about 6 million people as part of a global initiative that we're aiming to skill 15 million people by 2023. We're also boosting digital growth in the country and the region through our commitments to launch new data center regions in Indonesia, New Zealand, and Malaysia. The Ministry of Public Health in Thailand, for example, used our technology, including Power BI, to adopt data-driven strategy and drive better decision-making, allowing hospitals to better respond to very changing and challenging circumstances. In the Philippines, the Department of Information and Communications Technology used our cloud to digitally transform their business permits, licensing systems, automating the process, resulting in cost and time savings. Through initiatives and partnerships like these, Andrea, we are accelerating digital transformation coming out of the pandemic and long into the future.
Thanks, Satya. This second wave of digital transformation that's impacting every company and every industry requires a digitally skilled workforce. What is Microsoft doing to improve employability and close the skills gap?
We have seen in-demand jobs changing, new in-demand roles emerging, and the skills needed to succeed evolving. During this time of change, people are eager to learn, gain new skills, grow their economic opportunity. It's been forecast that perhaps 800 million people will need to learn new skills for jobs by 2030. Every job will perhaps increasingly require digital skills. And in fact, over the next 5 years, nearly 149 million new tech jobs will get created in fields like software development, cybersecurity, machine learning. Last year, we launched a global skills initiative to help 25 million people worldwide acquire the needed digital skills and have already met this goal, reaching more than 30 million people with help from our partners. But we know this is just a start. We want to help every organization create that feedback loop between skills, learning, credentials, and jobs. We recently announced a new commitment to help employers make 250,000 skills-based hiring before the end of 2021. In APAC, we partnered with the Ministry of Labor in Thailand to upskill 4 million Thai people, increasing their ability to reach more employment opportunities with Microsoft Digital Skills Curriculum and learning resources. And through our partnership with Grab, we're bridging digital skills across all of Southeast Asia to improve employability of drivers through our public sector skills initiative. Since the launch, we've already upskilled more than 616,000 drivers across 5 countries. By applying our technologies and partnering across the private and public sectors, we believe we can make progress in closing the skills gap.
Satya, we talk about purpose-driven digital. For example, in Indonesia, Jijakan is using sensors and AI on trees and in soil to clean the Citarum River, so 20 million people have access to clean drinking water. And in Sri Lanka, the 150-year-old tea industry safeguarded more than 2 million jobs by moving to e-auctions during the pandemic. What responsibility do companies have to ensure no one is left behind as the world recovers?
I've been quoting an Oxford economist, Colin Mayer, who wrote a book called Prosperity, where he talks about the social contract of any corporation or enterprise. He defines it as creating profitable solutions to the challenges of people and planet, with the key word being profitable and the other key word being challenges of people and planet. At the core of a company must be, I would say, a business model that's aligned with the world's success. For us at Microsoft, it means if we do well, the world must do well. As the world recovers, we require more from technology to address some of the most pressing challenges of the world to ensure that nobody's left behind. In New Zealand, for example, we have partnered with Sustainable Coastlines to develop an AI-powered tool for our AI for Earth program, empowering communities to clean up and restore New Zealand's 15,000-kilometer coastline. So that's just one example.
Satya, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your insights and perspective. In Asia Pacific, public sector plays a crucial role in empowering nations to enable a digital society. And that's what grounds us in our mission, to empower every person and every organisation on the planet to achieve more. Thank you for being with us today and for sharing your insights.
No, thank you so much again for having me, Andrea. It's been such a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to our continuing work together. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Satya and Andrea. We are looking forward to the future ahead and the immense impact to our nations and communities as we build stronger partnerships, embrace digital as the new currency. So Aviv, what do we have next?
Up next, we have our leadership panel led by Ahmed Mazari, President of Microsoft Asia, who will be joined by thought leaders of their respective fields from World Bank, the World Economic Forum, Asia Development Bank, and KPMG to help answer the question, how can digital and data drive post-COVID-19 economic recovery?
And cut. One more thing to be safe.
Governments and public sector bodies are being challenged like never before, with issues both local and global in scale. From responding to the COVID-19 pandemic to ensuring equity for citizens and communities, the pace of change is accelerating, while expectations rise. KPMG and Microsoft combine deep industry expertise with advanced technologies, strengthening our long-standing alliance to help you address complex public sector issues. Together, we can help modernize your organization and meet ever-evolving citizen expectations through flexible, cloud-based and mobile-first solutions. We merge Microsoft's innovative leading-edge technologies with KPMG's insight for successful deployment. KPMG and Microsoft work collaboratively with you to drive broad and measurable impact, from building scalable smart city solutions to transforming data use for law enforcement agencies and helping to ensure relief payments reach the right people at the right time. At the heart of it all, meeting the needs of your most important customers, the citizens themselves.
Welcome to a great panel where we will discuss the impact of COVID in the region and the potential opportunity we have with digital. COVID has been an event and a series of impact that it has created around our world in Asia and across the world. Firstly, my heart goes out to all the people in the region who are deeply suffering from this impact and continue to deal with some unprecedented social and health conditions. There has been really two parts that I thought I would get this panel to talk about, and I'll introduce the panel in just a bit. It's really about the digital haves and have-nots and what it has done to social impact. On the other hand, how technology has become even more dominant and what role and responsibility we as technology leaders have in helping shaping the future of Asia and the rest of the world. It really brings to question, how do we make the recovery stronger? How do we create more resilience? And how can technology play a much bigger role? I have the great pleasure of having a wonderful global panel. I think we have like 4 or 5 time zones here. Let me start with the furthest away. Sheila Warren joins us from San Francisco and is the deputy head of the 4th Industrial Revolution Dialogue at WEF. As we go slightly more east, Bethania joins us from Ann Arbor. And thank you, ladies, for joining us late your evening. She's part of the World Bank, and the World Bank is playing a very important role in helping with societal progress and economic inclusion. As we get closer, Bruce works for ADB. I think Bruce is out of Jakarta this morning, if I'm not mistaken. And finally, Sanjay, the Chief Data Officer from Adelaide. So truly a global panel with geo-positioning around the world, and perhaps we'll get the signals from what's happening across the world. And if we can launch in right away, I want to start with technology for economic recovery. If some of you had joined this session earlier, Satya spoke about skilling, which has been significantly enabled by tech. He also spoke about healthcare and healthcare impact. Andreas spoke about the work that we've done in Indonesia, and the list can carry on. Let me start by first asking Sheila, what are the bold decisions that public sector needs to make to accelerate growth? We see a lot of stimulus, but what real actions do we expect public sector to be making?
Thank you, first of all, for having me at this excellent summit with these wonderful panelists. I really look forward to the conversation today. I think the time for bold action really is upon us. If there's one thing, I think, to your point, Ahmed, that we've noted during COVID-19, it is the expansion of the digital divide. Unfortunately, we have not corrected digital divide issues during this time. We've instead seen an investment in kind of an 80-20 fashion, where those who already had things like access to certain kinds of infrastructure or devices or connectivity, whatever it might be, were able to leverage some technologies, some that exist, some that are kind of more cutting edge, whereas those who didn't have that kind of access to infrastructure, devices, financial resources, technological literacy were even further left behind. And I think that's true across a variety of different sectors. So I think that, to your question, it is a time to take bold action. I think there are a couple of things that need to be done to future-proof technological investments that are made. One is thinking about digital public goods, thinking about how public sector actors can actually create open source, open access digital public goods that can then be leveraged by different actors in the ecosystem to close digital divide and to enhance and raise standard of living for all. That also involves budget investment, significant budget investment in things like technical infrastructure, in architecture, and ensuring that not only is there budget under one political leader who might be so inclined or have the current will because of this crisis that the region is still very much in, but having future-proofed that so that the maintenance of those systems isn't something that falls by the wayside and is not kept up. So I think one of the boldest actions I think political leaders can take is to ensure that these budget lines for technology are considered permanent and are really made consistent, so that the support for technology isn't something that's going to blow around with the political winds, but be something that is really truly an investment from the entirety of the nation. So that's my initial response to your question.
Thank you, Sheila. And I think you make two important points about, one, the divide has exacerbated, and the other is about budget lines. And that probably, kind of leads me to ask Duthina this point about, the role of government. I mean, I actually shudder to think if we had the pandemic in 2015, our video capabilities were poorer, our collaboration capabilities were poorer, and broadband access was at best patchy. Now, we've made progress in the last 5 years, but there's still, swaths of population in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, and different parts of the world, in Africa and Latin America, where connectivity is still patchy. What role can World Bank play, and what role should governments play in at least creating equality of access?
Thank you. Great question. And clearly the pandemic highlighted the multiple layers of the digital divide. So we know, as you mentioned, between countries, there is a big divide. ITU has estimated that we still have 3.7 billion people still unconnected, mostly in developing countries. But also the divide during the pandemic was clearer, I think, looking at the divide within countries. And here it's really multiple layers. It's a geographic layer, so a big divide between urban areas and rural areas. It's also around the gender. We know COVID was not gender neutral. And also along the purchasing power of people. So those who have the means to afford the internet were able to cope with the pandemic, and those who cannot afford it find it more difficult. So it is a case of a pandemic of inequality in a way. And while digital has been a great hidden hero in a way, it really showed that it created deeper inequalities between the haves and the have-nots when it came to digital, to the tools to hook to the world that became virtual overnight. So the role of government is very, very important. It's important to lay the foundations for this connectivity to take place. It is important to make sure that there are very good policies and regulatory environments to enable the private sector to invest, to do more on digital infrastructure. And this is across the internet value chain. From when the internet gets to the country, going through the backbone to the last mile and to rural connectivity, there is a role for government to make sure that the policies and regulations are in place to enable competition, enable fair rules of the games, and enable innovation. There are times where there is not only policy failure, but there is a market failure in areas where connectivity is difficult for remote areas and for rural communities. So the role of the public sector here is basically to use public resources in a catalytic manner to make sure that those who are unconnected get the connectivity that is needed. I think the third role that is very important for government is also to create good policies that can drive demand. And here, the digital divide, as you mentioned, is a stubborn one, but we're living in a time where we see a second type of digital divide. It's not just a divide in access to connectivity, but divide in usage. And there are many cases where, the connectivity is there, but people are not using it because it's expensive, or they don't see good content, or they're not interested. And something that the pandemic did for the agenda is clearly help make the case of the importance of digital, deeper adoption of digital, and it is a good time now to take advantage of this opportunity where digital took a center stage, I think, in the efforts of coping with the pandemic, to capitalize on those lessons and really take the agenda to the next level.
Very insightful, thank you. And you make a big case of the convergence of public sector and governments alike, as well as the private sector coming together to bridge the divide. That really leads me to Bruce. And Bruce, as you sit with ADB and you see economies in Asia which are performing at the levels they are, and also equally economies that suffer. What steps should we take to create the empowerment that reduces the bridge? What policies and how do we lobby for the marginalized group to be more included?
Well, thanks, Ahmed, and congratulations to Microsoft for organizing this event. It's a really important discussion, and it's right at the center of the prospects for the region, as we've seen over the last 18 months or so. I'm actually speaking from the ADB building in Manila. Splendid building, which normally would have 5,000 or 10,000 visitors on a day, but at the moment it's got a couple of hundred. We've just finished our annual meeting virtually for the second time. And just think about it. 5 or certainly 10 years ago, we couldn't have done what we have done over the past 12 months. We've rolled out $30 billion in loans, in grants, in technical assistance, with a workforce that's now spread across 6 continents. And frankly, we couldn't have done that with the connectivity our IT team has given us. Microsoft is one of our partners in that, by the way. But the way we've been able to connect a dispersed workforce, develop more than 50 new digital products, and do our business to get assistance to people simply wouldn't have been possible 5 or 10 years ago. So the environment we're in is a quite different one. 3 things I think to note. One is, of course, the pockets of poverty are significantly deepened by the pandemic. We're dealing with a challenging environment in which many countries have faced significant setbacks over the past period, and so we're working from a more difficult situation. And in a sense, the many challenges that we faced pre-pandemic, digitalization, supply chain shifts, demographic, climate, gender, they've all been compressed together. And in fact, the environment for response to that has become more challenging in a sense. On the other hand, I think as some of your speakers have pointed out, there are some bright signals that we have plenty of tools which, if applied rightly by government working with business, we can do some good things. We've certainly seen a surge in e-commerce. We've seen deployment of many technological solutions. We've certainly seen the proliferation of new business models, and often done by SMEs and small business as much as big business. And those are all promising signs for where we go from here. I think we've done quite a bit of work to look across the region and see where the employment opportunities will be in the period ahead, and how digitalization will actually empower opportunities in those sorts of sectors. If you look at tourism, which is a massive employer, of course, across the region, there's no doubt that its recovery will depend on new skill sets, particularly around health and hygiene, but also the movement of people. So there's a an enormous amount of work to do there. Agro-processing, really some of the vulnerabilities in supply chains have been shown up by the pandemic, particularly in the first 6 months. It took an enormous effort to address that. So we need more efficient, we need different levels of automation, we need more levels of 4.0. Garments, again, a big employer, but the prospect of doing things in a more sustainable way that allows customization of product and smart factories, I think is really an important opportunity. Electronics, we are seeing those supply chain shifts, but if we want to be more than an enabler of jobs in the low end, simple assembly or packaging, and we want people to move up the value chain and get better jobs, and all the way that flows through into the broader economies, we've got to think about whether we have the human skills that are necessary to do that and how we actually support that skill development. And then, of course, on digital trade, it's a $1.7 trillion economy here. It can double over the next 3 or 4 years, but there's so much work to do in connectivity and skills development, enabling SMEs to be part of this, in tracing out IT, BPO roadmaps, all these sorts of things. So plenty of challenges, some significant setbacks, but the response to the pandemic has given us some real pointers to what we need to do and in what sectors.
Extremely provocative, Bruce, and especially the point you made about the divide creating poorer societies. As a matter of fact, I recall reading somewhere that over 100 million people have slipped into poverty over the last 1 year, and that can be quite punishing. So that really leads me, Sanjay, to ask you a question around budgets and investments. I mean, if we go back over the last several centuries, I mean, coal powered the Industrial Revolution, just like the steam turbine did, and then the last 30, 40 years has been computing, becoming very evident that tech investments will be critical for economic resurgence. How should governments think about budget allocation? I mean, governments think about how much do they spend on healthcare, how much in education, how much in infrastructure. Should governments begin to think about how much on tech?
Great. Well, thank you, Ahmed. Firstly, thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I really look forward to it. So we at KPMG just recently released a report called Modernising Government, Some Global Trends. And what it highlighted is that governments really need to invest in 5 or 6 different areas. The first one is being really, truly customer-centric. What we found was that 8 out of 10 government organisations are really putting customer front and centre of what they're doing. Governments need to invest to ensure that they're agile. They've really got to embrace their agile-like approaches. And so we're moving away from that world where we've got these big, large-scale, big-budget projects and moving to a world where we've got more agile, quick-win type projects. And so we're seeing more and more governments invest in those sorts of projects. I think the other thing we're seeing, and we've seen some comments around this earlier, is investing in building those collaborative relationships with others. So whether that's other government agencies or might be even other governments or the private sector, I think investing in those relationships is critically important as well. We're finding and we're hearing more and more about embracing the power of technology and data. And so using and investing in technology and data to support evidence-based insights and decision-making in the public sector is critically important as well. We've heard a few times, and Satya Nadella talked about skills. These are critical. Skills are critical for success in this digital transformation. So attracting, retaining, developing that next generation of sort of digital savvy civil servants is critically important. And then we also need to modernise the way we undertake risk management in government as well. So investing in supporting more flexible risk management frameworks to support that agile digital world is critical. And then finally, investing in operating as a connected enterprise. So breaking down the silos between different parts of your organisation and connecting your front, middle and back offices. So the point I'm trying to make here is that investing in technology is definitely very important, but it's not enough. You actually need to invest in organisational, cultural and operational change to really leverage the benefits of that technology investment.
Thank you, Sanjay. And if we may, kind of synthesize this, you spoke about budget lines, you spoke about collaboration, public-private partnerships. I think you spoke about the fact that the governments must come together and some of the insights we got from Bruce. I think it almost kind of synthesizes as an ecosystem, right? We need an ecosystem for progress that is more inclusive, where we're not talking about mean improvement, but median improvement. Are we significantly impacting? If you look at what happened through the pandemic, did the total wealth in the world decline? The answer is no. The average seems okay. It's the distribution that is consequential for us. So that really leads me to kind of, I'm probably going to ask, a discussion between Bettina and Sheila, and which is, how should we think about regulation of data and digital? The war brought about the United Nations, and United Nations played a role. We had United Nations, you had UNICEF, and many global bodies that help govern the world. Today, we seem to be at odds. People are pulling in many directions. And therefore, the connected point is when you say there's a public-private partnership, I can say for Asia, at least in this region, governments seem to think that the data of the citizens is theirs and there's a monetizing opportunity. Commercial enterprises want to use that data to create monetizable opportunities. But the fact of the matter is that we need a different level of governance. We need some rules and regulations around data. And we need some world, quote unquote, body that starts to think about how do we bring this all together. Just, ladies, what do you think about what we should do as institutions to progress this in a way that becomes accretive to the world?
But I know both of our institutions work quite a bit on this topic and think about it a lot. And so I'll start by just framing out what our point of view is on this. And I think that we're seeing more and more the complexity around, maintaining data moats and kind of seeing data as an asset that is really driving your value. It's really more and more becoming the analytics and insight layer that is really driving a lot of that, right? So that's what I think is the monetization focus is shifting a little bit slowly in some parts of the world more than in others, to that layer, which I think is a positive development. Now, what does that mean for the underlying data? Well, it certainly doesn't mean that all that data is suddenly becoming available to everyone and fully open or anything like that, despite many bodies that are moving in that direction and regulation that is now starting to understand that that is a legitimate point of view and that data protection can actually lead to a lot of complexity and unintended consequences, some of which we've seen, even though it's, of course, a noble predicate, to some of the activity we're seeing in the regulatory space. So we talk a lot within the forum about the purpose of data. So what is it that data access can provide in terms of insight? How do we begin to shift the narrative and understand that it's very hard to classify most kinds of data at the moment it's created? It really is about who is going to be using that data and for what purpose. How public, quote unquote, right, is that purpose? What is the nature of what the actor leveraging that data is going to do with the insight? All these things actually do factor into how we as a society ought to think about the treatment of data, and that includes from a regulatory perspective. So fundamentally, I think what we're trying to do or achieve is this migration of the thinking around data and thinking about what it can actually unlock when there is more open access to it and when we're really focusing on which actors at what points in time, as opposed to this data must be protected in these particular ways under all circumstances, period, full stop. because that has, as we've seen during this particular crisis that we remain in, has actually led to limitations in the flexibility, the agility, to some of Sanjay's points, of the responses that could be developed, because there just wasn't an ability to get access to the data that could have actually led to insights that in this particular case could have been life-saving.
Yes, and I think from the bank side, we just released the World Development Report 2021, which had the title, Data for Better Lives. And basically, the point that the WDR is pushing is the importance of a new social contracts when it comes to data. So today there is a lot of opportunity that, of course, data can unlock for development. The discussion around data governance and the regulatory issues, of course, very important. We see there is not much voice of the developing countries in that discussion. And basically the call of the WDR is to make sure that, we push for a framework that takes advantage of the many opportunities that data can offer for development, and of course looking at the risks, looking at the framework around the data governance. It talks about the importance of institutions, the importance of collaboration, and the importance to make sure that developing countries follow the discussion to the end. It is complicated because I think there are different approaches to data, and I totally agree with Shayla. I think not losing sight of the main objective is very important as we see the development around what is the best model, what is the best approach, and there are many layers to the question about regulation. Of course, the layer around data privacy and governance, the issues around data, interoperability, the issues around transfer of data, data localization, and each one opens a big door of many questions. So it is a fascinating topic for development. Now we cannot talk about digital economy if these issues around data are not at the heart of the discussion. And I invite you to look at the WDR 2021. I think it frames the discussion. Of course, there is a lot happening with other institutions. It frames it within the context of developing countries and the questions, and it recognizes that there is clearly not an answer to every question, but definitely important to think about a new approach, a new social contract for data.
You raise a very interesting point about the fact that the emerging economies, developing economies, do not really have a voice around data. And the dichotomy is that emerging economies and developing economies probably are going to produce more data just as a consequence of their population. In the country where I was born, there is a big program, India, there's a big program around accumulating health data. And think about 1.3 billion people health data. That kind of lends itself to a unique opportunity for accelerating healthcare. More precision medicine based on South Asian genetics. It's the acceleration from experimentation between public and private sector. But I want to just connect the dots between where Sheila started and Bettina, where you wrapped up, which is governments seem to be retracting. The number of discussions I've had with governments around data sovereignty, around where data is stored, who owns the data, it has actually accelerated during the pandemic. It was probably important, but not consequential. And at this stage, it's become more front and center. So I would like to turn this to Bruce, and I'll come back, Sanjay, to you in just a bit. But Bruce, this really kind of leads me to ask, so what is the interoperability that we just heard? And how should governments collaborate? I mean, we do not have a global agency for tech or data.
No, we don't. We don't have one single agency for any of this. And we probably won't have one single agency that deals with the digital agenda or data flows and the like. There are bits and pieces. It's a bit like a patchwork, frankly. There's an awful lot happening, and developing countries are involved in some of it. You look at the work within the WTO on e-commerce rules, for instance. So that's a negotiation that's got around about 80% of the global economy, I'd say, represented, actively represented. You look at the way digital economy agreements are rolling out. So the most advanced, even more advanced than the TPP, is probably the Australia-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement, which addresses data protection, source code, digital identities, rules around AI, e-certification, all these sorts of things, which actually are important enablers for our economies, not just at the border, but right across the economy. But it is a patchwork, and like most areas of global governance, they're not fixed by one institution or one process. They're a patchwork which has to be knitted together by people who actually actively work to have multilateral frameworks that protect the weakest, that enable growth for all, that spread the benefits, that have transparent and fair regulation, which provide opportunity. So it has to be a global endeavour. It has to be one that's led multilaterally by institutions like the G20, by the multilateral development banks, by organisations like the WTO and the World Intellectual Property Organisation and others. And this is the big area of global governance to be addressed over the next decade or two. And it will take a lot of work, and there'll be a lot of different pieces that have to fall into place, but it's quite an important piece of work.
Thanks, Bruce. Sanjay, turning to you, I think safe and inclusive kind of jumps up to me as important attributes for progress. Are people safe about sharing data? Do they feel included in the economic recovery? What role should we play? And this is an interesting group of people. We have two from the private sector, and we have two from the economic inclusion and one from enablement. So if we think about this group coming together, if the five of us were meeting and we were saying, how should we take steps to create inclusive and responsible and safe innovation, what would the few actions you would advise?
Yeah, so great question, great conversation, and it's very topical and front of mind for me. And the reason being is one of the things that I'm championing within the Australian KPMG firm is a framework around trustworthy AI. So if you think of data is actually the fuel for AI, and AI is really, I think, the transformational technology in this digital transformation agenda. And one of the key things that I think is absolutely imperative to ensure the acceptance of AI is engendering trust in that AI system. So, and that trust element is very much, going back to Sheila's point, is very much about ensuring that you get alignment between the purpose for which you're using the AI and the system itself. So taking that really human-centered approach, really understanding and articulating what is the purpose of the use of the AI and what's the benefit that it's going to provide. Is there a shared benefit? Is it being used in a fair and equitable way, etc.? So I think there's a lot of work that we all collectively can do to sort of help develop frameworks that help us deploy, conceptualize, develop, and deploy these sorts of technologies in a fair and trusted manner, where the people are at the centre of that. So that, I guess, that would be my main overriding comment in terms of how collectively we could help in this agenda.
Thank you, Sanjay, and I think we're at the end of time. We've gone through some very intense and powerful thoughts and provocation in the last 20 minutes, perhaps. We could go on for the rest of the day. And I think I'll struggle to synthesize what you have come together as a group and advice, but I'm going to try and attempt to do so, and please chime in. but I thought a couple of things that emerged. One was a very clear conclusion that public-private partnership, multilateralism, will be absolutely fundamental to creating progress in the new digital world. The second was trust and inclusion. I certainly took away from all the commentary that I got from the panelists about trust and inclusion being fundamental for societal progress. And the third aspect was, in some ways, I think a push, especially as I heard Bettina talk about equality. How do developing nations, how do emerging nations have a voice, have an equal voice on how is data governed, how is data leveraged, and what role can trade bodies play in creating progress. And finally, I thought there was a clear agreement from this group that governments must have the intentionality of creating the next level of digital infrastructure so as to enable a very equal economic inclusion. I'm sure I've left out a ton of stuff, but we're at the end of time. Any 15-second, I can go around round robin with all of you. Anyone can start.
Can I add something, Ahmed? And that is, it's not cheap to digitalize. It requires significant resources. And one of the things the ADB has launched in the last few days has been the Asia Pacific Tax Hub, which is all about ensuring the smallest and weakest economies can actually get on a sustainable revenue path so that they can actually fund these sorts of developments. And it's a critically important thing for the region.
Anyone else?
I mean, one comment I'd make is that this is definitely a team game, and so collaboration is going to be absolutely critical to the success in this front.
And I'll just chime in to say, I think that in addition to collaboration among ecosystem actors, it's also important to recognize that technologies intersect with each other as well. And so there's a lot of power in leveraging legacy systems and bringing in technologies that are now in their adolescent phase with those that might remain frontier. And it's important to be tracking kind of what is happening and not assuming that the thing that is the cutting edge thing is actually what is needed. So focusing on the problem that any particular actor is trying to solve, looking outside your own structure, whether that might be government or corporate, to what other actors in the ecosystem are needed to come into the team and work together. And then thinking about a basket almost of technologies that's going to drive the solution forward is of critical importance.
And then from my side, just a reminder that technology is important, but it's not an end on itself. The ultimate goal is to improve people's lives. At the World Bank, we firmly believe that inclusive and trusted digital solutions will help accelerate the journey towards the SDGs. We're very fortunate to work with many, many great partners. Microsoft has been a great partner of ours since we created the DDP, also working closely with WEF, working with the other development banks. And the future is clearly digital. We have a huge opportunity to make it inclusive, safe, and green.
Thank you. Look, as an organization, Microsoft's purpose of empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more is more real, and we have a responsibility towards that. Thank you for the great discussion. I appreciate you investing the time from across the world. We could have gone on for much longer, but I really, really appreciate you investing the time. Thank you very much. And be well and be safe.
Thank you, Sheila, Bhuthemia, Bruce, Sanjay, and Ahmed. Some great perspectives on how governments and nations need to prioritize digital skills, broadband access, to ensure everyone can participate in the digital economy.
Leading our next panel discussion is Ann Johnson, Microsoft's Corporate Vice President for Security, Compliance, and Identity on cybersecurity, collaboration, cooperation, and building a resilient cyber defense ecosystem. She is joined by Dato Dr. Amiruddin Abdul Wahab, CEO of Cybersecurity Malaysia, Dr. Chang Hee-Yun, Principal Researcher of AI Future Strategy Center, Korea National Information Society Agency, and Group Captain Amon Chomchoi, Acting Deputy Secretary General of Thailand National Cybersecurity Agency, and as well as Sherry Ng, General Manager, Public Sector Asia Pacific, Microsoft.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I was going to spend, I appreciate the panelists joining also. I was going to spend the first few minutes talking about current and future threats and talking about some resilience and zero trust strategies. Then I was going to talk to Sherry a little bit about this wonderful council that she has actually put together. We had a great inaugural event where we had 7 nations represented and talking about threats and collaboration. So we're going to start with the presentation. We're going to go to Sherry, and then we're going to talk to all of our panelists and get their perspective about collaboration and threats and why they think this council is so important. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you find it a very informative session. So let's begin by talking about what Microsoft is seeing in the threat landscape today. We actually inform our solutions by trillions of signals on a daily basis. Now, the volume of signal is not nearly as important to us as actually the diversity of signal. Because when we were thinking about informing a machine learning engine that's going to keep our customers safer and keep Microsoft internally safer, we need a broad diversity of data, geographic diversity, the type of signal, and then the machine learning engine becomes more intelligent and we can actually detect threats in milliseconds. We can block them, and we can block them across the entirety of the ecosystem so that we can keep our customers globally safe before the threat actually ever comes into their environment. One of the trends we're seeing, though, with cybercrime is that it tends to follow the issues of the day. So when we were a year ago, think back to a year ago when we were all starting to talk about COVID, a little over a year ago. What we saw were themes that the cyber criminals were not creating new malware, but rather what they were doing is they were creating new phishing lures based on existing malware. So get your test here, sign up for a vaccine trial. All of these phishing lures have a sense of urgency around them. You want to be the first to get something, but it allows the bad actors to actually repurpose their infrastructure. It improves the return on investment and lowers their cost of attack. So as you're thinking about new threats in the environment, always think about the legacy threats in the environment that can be repurposed based on the news of the day that's going to attract the attention of your organizations and the people within your organizations. One of the other threats we're seeing related to ransomware is we're seeing a significant amount of what we call human-operated ransomware. So if you go all the way back, 2013 and think about CryptoLocker, and then you think about wholesale attacks like WannaCrypt or the NotPetya attack, those attacks were actually very purpose-built malware and ransomware intended to do something very specific. What we're seeing now with ransomware is the evolution of human-operated ransomware, meaning that the ransomware will act departmentally. So it'll come into your organization at one place, it will encrypt the data, they may threaten to actually release the data if you don't pay the ransom, but it moves around the departments within the organization. They don't do a wholesale attack because they know they can increase, again, the return on investment and lower their cost of attack. One thing we always talk about at Microsoft is raising the cost of attack to the attacker. And we talk about doing that through fundamental principles like zero trust, making sure you're using multi-factor authentication, making sure you have least privilege within everything in your environment, making sure you're interrogating every transaction in a session, and making certain you assume breach. Those are the core principles of zero trust, and regardless of the type of attack, we believe those principles will keep the organizations much more secure. The final thing I want to talk about is we have been studying IoT and OT and ICS systems, which are all a little bit different. But we know there is a significant increase in threats against IoT environments. We also know that those environments aren't well managed within organizations. They may be legacy technical debt. They may be systems you don't own, so you cannot update them or patch them. So you need to think about in your environment how you take advantage of air gapping or network segmentation. Take advantage of the technology like the Azure IoT security solution to understand the behavior of the device, but also make certain those devices that you are suspect on their behavior or that you can't patch or update, they are in a place that they cannot harm the entirety of your environment. And they should also be, the IoT devices should also be part of your zero trust architecture. So interrogating every transaction also that comes in from an IoT device. With that framing of current threats, I wanted to move into a conversation with the panel, and I'd like to start with Sherry. First, thank you, Sherry, for being here, and thank you for your leadership in actually creating this council. So can you talk to us a little bit about what drove the inception of the Cybersecurity Executive Council, what your vision is for it, and what you think the impact that you are going to achieve through this council?
Thank you, Anne. What you just articulated is enough compelling reasons for us to all come together. We can see, the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated technological adoption at an unprecedented pace. At the same time, the digital world was coming and merging with our physical realm. That has increased, the impact of cyber attacks around the world. And today our lives are actually made super convenient, more convenient through all the online connectivity, the powerful mobile devices, for example. But this has at the same time actually created a lot more vulnerability into cyber attacks and cyber threats. Satya said about how in an interconnected world, it's not about any one point solution or person. It's about having an architectural approach where it needs to be reinforced on a daily basis. So if you look at countries and how country has extensive borders, that we must fortify every potential point of entry. The growing expanse of the digital networks must be placed under tighter surveillance and requires that collective partnership where all stakeholders in the ecosystem comes together. And this is the reason why we brought together the Asia Pacific Cybersecurity Executive Council for one sole purpose. And we're really looking at cybersecurity is a national priority for all of us. And it's a joint cause, hoping that all of us as industry leaders, key stakeholders, policymakers will come together and continuously strengthen that cyber defense posture within our own organizations and, more importantly, within nation states. We will also, make known to some very astounding statistics for Asia Pacific. It's just amazing. In 2020, last year, we saw about more than 80% of APAC organizations suffered some form of cyber attacks. Wow. And in the last 12 months, and it's just very astounding to hear that there were more than 34 nation-state campaigns that were launched in the last 12 months. At the same time, in the first half of 2020, we saw an increase of about 35% in the volume of attack. You talk about, it's not just about volume and diversity, but here volume itself is increasing at an unprecedented pace. Which is why we came together as, as a council with this one mission. We truly believe that as we come together, we can build a strong coalition and collaboration. And with collective intelligence, technology, resources, we can all work on combating cybersecurity threats and make Asia Pacific truly a more safer environment to operate in. We're very, very privileged as we go around and we speak to government leaders about the inception of this, council. We're super privileged to have more than 15 members join us as the founding members across 7 nation states. And, all of us you talk about the inaugural event that we had. It was just really heartening to see that everyone came together and they pledged, hey, let's ensure that we contribute with our collective resources. Let's ensure that we come together and share our best practices of how do we widen and deepen and develop a bigger cybersecurity talent pool around the region. And at the same time, we really committed to, and you talk about this, how do we bring all this collective intelligence, not just for the council? We're looking to publish an ebook where we can go around the region to build and raise awareness, to share joint intelligence. And today I'll end with super privilege. We have Dr. Yoon representing Korea with us. He's a founding member, super passionate about the work that he's been doing and how it can extend beyond the region. We also have Dr. Amiruddin from Malaysia, as well as Captain Amon from Thailand. I think we're going to have a very exciting conversation with them. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Sherry, and congratulations, by the way. The inaugural launch has just been fantastic, and the commitment of the nations that have joined, you can feel it. You can feel how they are understanding the impact of being a member. So let's talk a little bit about then how this council is going to contribute to the national agenda, the impact that you are expecting from collaboration with your peers regarding threats. Dr. Yoon, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective of why you've joined the council and the impact that you expect?
Yeah, thank you. I'm pleased to participate in this meaningful event as a panel today. As Sherry mentioned right before, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the technical adoption. So, in Korea, students who entered the last year are more comfortable to take a class online rather than physical world. So we are no longer surprised that the contactless world can be commonplace. So gradually, the boundary between physical and the cyber world is disappearing. So I think that the world is changing so rapidly, so new technology policies must be developed. So let me introduce the Korea government, the Digital New Deal strategy project first. So Digital New Deal is designed to make a foundation in order to compete internationally in the promising fields such as 5G, AI, and big data, also to make job creation as well. The Digital New Deal consists of 12 tasks in 4 areas. First, enhancing the DNA. It stands for Data Network AI. So DNA ecosystems such as data construction, sharing, and utilization. And second is digital transformation of education infrastructure, such as building digital-based educational infrastructure in elementary, middle, and high school. And third one is fostering contactless industry, for example, smart healthcare and caregiving infrastructure. And last one is the digitalization of SOC project, such as building digital management information system for critical infrastructure in 4 major areas in Korea. As a part of the enhancing the DNA ecosystem, the AI learning data construction project has been promoted. As it is a new deal project, it was promoted for the purpose of creating jobs and establishing the foundation for AI industry. In this process, it was not easy to systematically establish the process of collecting, processing, managing, and distributing large-scale data, including security issues. In order to increase scalability and compatibility in the future, the data standards are very important. So a data construction guide was created, we made before, maybe last year. In order to resolve sensitive data issues, there were also issues related to data sovereignty, data block processing, data relocation, and distribution platform, and so on. Because it builds a huge amount of large-scale data, it was an important issue how to make a platform that can upload, download, and manage massive data efficiently based on cloud platform. In this way, each country would have been various experiences in the process of promoting digital development. So through sharing the trial and errors in the process among countries, I think it will be help to develop the digital development strategy that can be mutually win-win relationship. So finally, I think it will be useful to reduce the digital divide and help sustainable development among countries. So my recommendation is creating it's a knowledge belt that links data with high availability among countries in the Asia Pacific area. In order to build this, it is necessary to create a cooperation system to share various experiences of each country. Firstly, so it would be good to select high priority fields for mutual cooperation, such as medical care and manufacturing, and then we can expand them in stage. Yeah, that's my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yun. Thank you for putting so much thought into it. And I agree with you. Data, breaking that digital divide and really breaking it down amongst countries and focusing on data in critical industries is someplace we all need to go to be collectively better.
Yes.
I would love to hear your perspective, Dr. Amir, about what you think the impact is in your national agenda and how this council is going to contribute to it.
First of all, I think we have to understand that we are in a highly connected world. I think that what Sherry mentioned. And obviously, not only we are in a highly connected world, we are interconnected. So as such, obviously, with all these new emerging technologies that comes into place, there's also an increase of exposure to cybersecurity risk. And as such, that's why I think we need this type of council, so that we can share information, we can share knowledge, and we can leverage on each other's strengths, And then we believe that it shouldn't be done only at the technical level, but also at the management level. Because we have to see that, to me, cybersecurity goes beyond technical. It is important. Yes, no doubt that technology is important, but it is no longer sufficient. It has to cover a wide spread of elements such as people, process, and technology all together, a more holistic approach. And as such, in the context of a nation, it goes beyond technology, but in fact, it has reached the level of strategic and the national level. At the corporate level, it involves I would say, the management level and even at the board level. Because nowadays people can no longer work alone in isolation. Everyone needs to be involved. In the case of cybersecurity in Malaysia, for example, we are actively involved at the technical multilateral platform. For example, under Cybersecurity Malaysia, we have MyCert, the Malaysia Computer Emergency Response Team. And we are actively involved at the technical level, where we are currently the chair of the Asia Pacific Computer Emergency Response Team. We are also the past chairman and also the current permanent secretariat to the OIC Computer Emergency Response Teams. Why we are involved in all these various multilateral platforms? We believe the importance of collaboration. And obviously, when Microsoft initiated this idea of establishing this executive council for the APAC, we believe this is a way forward, because we need to work together. As I mentioned earlier, we are in the interconnected system, and no one can protect our system by ourselves. We have to also ensure that our partners, our stakeholders, our clients, all the environment, the ecosystem that we are in, we are all secure. And that's why I believe that the involvement of Cybersecurity Malaysia in this is very crucial and important. And we have to see that collaboration is a key element in supporting our own national defense or our national cybersecurity strategy, and to bring forward a safe and secure nation for the country. And in the context of Malaysia, we have our initiative called Digital Malaysia.
Thank you, Dr. Amir. And I think you said something really important. It's not just about the technology. It's about the management. It's about the process. And we need to always think about that. We talk a lot about technology, but technology alone cannot solve our problems. And collectively, we should leverage each other's strengths across all of those things. So, Captain Amoran, I would love to get your perspective on what you think the impact will be of this council, and the impact both to your national agenda and also into the collaboration.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this council will have a great impact in improving the collaboration between nations. Since COVID-19, I think all the nations around the world have been impacted one way or another from cyber threats. Okay, even before COVID-19, our nation is very well connected. Around 75% of people have access to the internet. So in some way, when the COVID-19 hits our nation, It's not that hard to do work from home when you have a lot of meeting online, sometimes 8 to 10 times a day. It's not that difficult to do because we are well connected. But also it comes with a lot of problem by itself because since the COVID-19 have some impact on the economy. So the government have to release the economy support program for the people, which in the past we couldn't imagine that it will happen because it will require people to stay a long line and take a risk to get COVID-19. But now everyone have mobile phone, so they can use it to have access to the economy support package. Okay, so in some way, since we already have very well connected and digital supported network, and people have enough digital literacy to take advantage of it. But also, as you know, the risk will be increased as well. A lot of phishing campaign, a lot of cybercrime, and also people will take advantage because they cannot meet face to face. So a lot of transactions have to be done online. So that's the risk we are facing. Okay. So I think this platform of collaboration will help us in to get in early understanding of newly and upcoming cyber threat, so that we can share it to the people. Because I do agree with our team that people is the main component, and the relationship between the people that we have here in this panel discussion will help us be able to anticipate the cyber threat and try to counter it before it becomes another pandemic in the cyber world. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Warren. I really do appreciate that analogy because I think it's something everyone can grasp. And we have 2 more questions for this really incredible, informative panel. We're running a little long, so I've been asked by the control room to ask the next question with brevity so we can get through everyone and get answers. So we're going to start the next question with Sherry. And Sherry, can you talk a little bit about the insight you have into cyber defense strategy? What should be the short, mid, and long-term goals?
I think, and one of the things as we come together, we are all fighting the same front individually. As a council, I think it provides a tremendous opportunity for us to all come together and do it with a concerted effort. So the immediate goal is really for us to come together and share intelligence very openly that will help each one of us be able to address, the attacks in a more informative and proactive manner.
Thank you, Sherry. Captain Amoran, what do you think the priorities need to be in the top priorities, short, mid, and even long term?
Okay, to make it short and easier to remember, the first priority in short term is people. Okay, and within this year we have the plan to increase the number of people for cyber workforce to 1,000 people. And it's not just for the people in the cyber workforce. We need to educate the people at the users and also the executive level in all the organization. That would be our short-term goal. And at the mid or middle term is that we have to increase the cybersecurity awareness for the society. When I say society, it means that the people that we have improved will go back to their own organization and make it better, make it resilient, make sure that people from the top understand our cyber policies, our governance, risk, and compliance, and technical people have the skill, and the people for the rest of the society have awareness. And long-term goal, we hope to have cybersecurity culture. Is when we're going to be resilient enough, because without cybersecurity culture, then it will be difficult to counter the new threat. But if we have the culture, the way of thinking to counter the new threat, then we will be better prepared Okay, so hopefully cybersecurity culture will be my cyber hacking vaccine for Thailand.
Thank you, and I think it's critical what you said, people, awareness, and culture. It's not just technology. Dr. Amir, same question. What do you think we should be prioritizing on?
Basically, and the context of Malaysia, specifically our organization, Cybersecurity Malaysia, as a government agency and also as a national technical reference and specialist center, our focus is basically to play the role to support the national agenda overall. And that covers two key documents, most recently been launched by our government, that we will need to support. The first blueprint is called MCSS, Malaysia Cybersecurity Strategy 2020-2024. This is approved by the Cabinet in 2020 January, and it's actually replacing our former National Cybersecurity Policy, which was launched in 2006, where it is more, I would say, comprehensive, where it covers the protection of not only the CNI or the critical national information infrastructure, but also cover the businesses, protection of businesses, industries, and even citizens. And not only focusing on national security, but also focusing to support the digital economy and the industry revolution, or IR 4.0. It covers 5 pillars that covers the aspects of people, process, and technology. That's the first document. The second document is called My Digital Blueprint, which was launched just last February, 19 February, by the Honorable Prime Minister of Malaysia, that focusing on 3 phases of building a digital economy for the country, where it focused on strengthening the digital foundation for the first year, for the first few years, and then driving the digital transformation and inclusion across the digital economy, and also to position Malaysia as a regional market producer. Under this blueprint, they have 6 strategic thrusts, and one of the thrusts is actually related to cybersecurity, which is to build a trusted ecosystem, a trusted, secure, and ethical digital environment. So as a National Technical Specialist Agency, our focus obviously will cover the 3 elements of people, process, and technology. But as a National Technical Specialist Agency, our top priorities is to support those two blueprints and become the domain expertise at the national and even regional level, because currently we have about 25 labs across various departments in Cybersecurity Malaysia. We have about 7 accredited labs, 4 collaborative labs with Center of Excellence in the various domain of expertise. The idea now is that we want to move towards building a national Center of Excellence in collaboration with local universities, industries, and also a research institute. So for that reason, we have defined our short-term, medium, and long-term. For short-term priorities is basically to continue to address the immediate threats for the country, and also to strengthen collaboration both locally and internationally. And obviously, that covers aspects of sectoral collaboration, public-private academia, and international also, regional, and also globally. And this is why, for example, our involvement with this APAC Microsoft Executive Council is one of the strategies or our priorities in the context of cybersecurity in Malaysia, short-term, medium, and long-term. And then in terms of the medium term, our focus is development of our technical capabilities in emerging areas, because nowadays convergence of technologies, and also with the emergence of new technologies like AI, blockchain, data analytics, etc., there is a need to look into the aspects of security from the technical angle, and at the same time to focusing on developing more local products and services for the country's needs. And the third, or the long-term priorities, which is for Malaysia to be self-resilience and be better prepared with the challenging future technologies that's out there. And at the same time, in the context of Cybersecurity Malaysia as an organization, to position itself as a world-class specialist agencies, and also to help and to contribute to keep Malaysia in the top 10 global ranking of the ITU Global Cybersecurity Index, as the last 3 studies, a report by Global Cybersecurity Index has placed Malaysia in the list of the top 10. So that is basically our priorities in the context of obviously looking onto all the elements of people, process, and technology for the next few years. Thank you.
So Dr. Yoon, you'd walked us through a lot of your priorities. I'm going to ask you a different question to wrap up the session. talk about what cybersecurity utopia looks like. If we were to have this perfect world, what does it look like to you?
We don't need the time enough. So, okay, it's an ideal, question. So, yeah, I think I have to say briefly. Okay, in order to set up a response system, so it would be better to operate regular related technology seminar in a PPP structure, as Microsoft mentioned. The private sector shares global cybersecurity technology issues and response solutions, and the public sector shares the government's cybersecurity response status and issues. So I think for secure cybersecurity based on cloud platform, I think there are two approaches as a technical and institutional way. So in technical approach, it is important how to design between private cloud and public cloud technology technically. And to cover up the last question, utopia for in a cyber world. Recently in Korea, the cyber characters coexisted with K-pop idol group members as a singer. And if food is ordered in a cyber game and then delivered to real home.
Wow.
Yeah, so we are experiencing kind of a mixed reality now. So I feel the cyber world, like as a movie Matrix, it makes me a little bit scared. In such a rapid transition into cyber world, I think we need to prepare the technical, the institutional mechanism, as I mentioned right before. That would be, but they are not eradicated of human dignity. So I think the utopia is a world where there is no worries about cyber side effects such as infringement of human rights and safety threat caused by computers. Yeah, that's my utopia cyber world.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Captain Morin the last question. I was reading a little bit about what you said. I always say cyber utopia is when cybersecurity actually doesn't exist. It's been mainstreamed into everything. So I was reading a little bit about what you said. So I wanted to get your perspective on that as we close.
Yeah, I would like to emphasize on the same thing, is that right now for cybersecurity, I don't know about the other country, but for us, sometimes we feel like we are the third wheels. They already have two wheels, but for cybersecurity, they think it's additional. But hopefully for cybersecurity utopia, they wouldn't think about if you need it or not. But cybersecurity is the roof or the steering wheel for the car. Okay, and hopefully, I was hoping for safe and trusted. What I mean by safe is that we can use it securely. But for trusted is something I hope for the future, is that right now there's a lot of disinformation, a lot of influence operation by using cyberspace as a medium. And it can cause instability in many of the countries around the world. So hopefully in the future, I want cyber world to be safe and trusted, where people can trust the information, or they have the ability to choose what they're gonna trust, so that in the democratic society, the next election will be based on fact or truth, not just the emotion that you are conveyed by some disinformation campaign or some information campaign from the political parties. That's what I hope for the cyber utopia.
Thank you, Captain Morin. Thank you, Dr. Yoon. Thank you, Dr. Amir. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. I really look forward to what this council is going to achieve. And I know this is going to also be a great session that we continue to run. Take care.
Thank you.
The cloud and mobility are creating a mega shift that's disrupting 30 years of networking and security infrastructure. Let me share with you why a traditional network and security architecture is no longer suitable for the cloud and mobile first world.
applications are moving to SaaS and to public clouds. The users are no longer sitting in the office. They are working from everywhere. But security is still anchored to the data center. Until now, Zscaler is redefining network security. We are a pioneer in cloud security and are a market leader. Today, the Zscaler Cloud protects more than 2,800 customers with users in over 185 countries. More than 200 of the Forbes Global 2000 count on Zscaler to help them move securely to the cloud. During peak periods, our cloud processes almost 40 billion transactions per day. It blocks more than 100 million threats every day and performs over 120,000 unique security updates to keep users safe. Zscaler has a massive opportunity to replace that network security market. And in the process, we offer our customers the opportunity to substantially reduce spending on expensive networking infrastructure as they embrace a mobile-first and a cloud-first strategy.
Thank you, Dr. Amir, Dr. Yun, Captain Amon, and Sheri. Congratulations on the launch of the Asia-Pacific Cybersecurity Executive Council. This is indeed a significant stride forward together as a community. Now, Aviv, over to you to introduce our next session.
We are now living in an increasingly digitized, hyper-connected, and globalized world. And with rapid digital transformation, the skills that we need to build today are fast evolving. Our next session is a fireside chat hosted by Fiona Carney, Chief Operations and Marketing Officer, Asia Pacific Microsoft. Before we hand over to Fiona, let's watch this video.
Hello and good morning, everybody. It's great to be with all of you today, and what a great lineup we've had. Now, we've heard a lot about the importance of digital transformation during the morning sessions, particularly around resilience and building resilience of organizations, but also for our transformation. And critical to all of this is really around building new skills. I am delighted to be here today with you to delve a little bit deeper into this topic, which I'm very, very passionate about. My name is Fiona Carney, and as Aviv said, I am the Chief Marketing and Operations Officer for Microsoft across APAC, and I'm joined today by Fionn Ang of our LinkedIn Talent Solutions organization to talk about what she and some of the organization are seeing in terms of key trends when we think about skilling and what we know is going to be required for the future. So you're very welcome, Fionn.
Hi, Fiona. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Fantastic. So we heard from Satya this morning that it's estimated that 800 million people will need to learn new skills by 2030, and that over the next 5 years, over 149 million new tech jobs will get created, whether that's in areas of cybersecurity, machine learning, artificial intelligence, data analytics, and many others that are linked to tech. And so today we wanted to cover a few elements of this, particularly delving into areas around the importance of a skills-based economy, how we should think about building the right learning culture to support that skills-based economy, which of course is critical to all of our organizations. We want to look a little bit at the lens of diversity and inclusion and how we can ensure that nobody is left behind as we think about skilling for the future. And finally, we want to think about the role of governments and where all of us can play in this space. John, let's get started. I think it's clear that we know skills are the new currency in an increasingly digitized, hyper-connected and globalized world. There is such a high demand at the moment from people to actually better their own skill set, upskill, build for a new future. So can you tell us, when you think about a skills-based economy, how is it shaping the future of employment and work?
Thank you, Fiona. Well, for very long, time, the way people got hired was based solely on the job that they had, the degree that they earned, or their networks, or the people that they knew. Our current system ignores the speed and increasing demands of today's economy. A degree is an achievement, but with careers stretching many years, a one-time intensive period of study is not enough. The reality is that with the current pace of change, everyone needs to continuously expand their skills. It could be from a college degree, an online course, or even an apprenticeship. With COVID, it has accelerated the pace of change required from both companies and professionals. In fact, it's estimated that 250 million jobs were displaced during the pandemic. And we see some professions such as waiters, flight attendants face widespread layoffs. Meanwhile, many companies struggle to source for talent from the traditional pool as organizations go through an accelerated pace of transformation. So looking ahead, we expect the future of work to be around an alternative, flexible, and evergreen path to jobs. Schools, governments, companies, individuals, we all need to transition to the hiring market from focusing solely on titles and companies, degrees and schools, to focus on skills and abilities. That skill-based economy. And I believe this is the future of our economy.
Absolutely, and I've been very privileged to meet a lot of people lately who have really invested in themselves and who have been able to make some fantastic transitions, whether it's from non-tech to tech, whether it's from being unemployed into employment, whether it's people who may have accessibility needs that have been able to do skilling. So I've seen some really great examples where people have transformed themselves. Now, underpinning all of this, we need to think about learning culture. And I spent a lot of time with customers recently talking to them about how they're creating an environment where people within their organizations can learn, whether that's across governments or private sector. The actual structure that needs to go into that has to be quite deliberate. So when you think about that, Fionn, how can we prepare our workforce, our employees, our citizens for the future? In other words, how can we really future-proof and enhance their employability?
Yeah, Fiona, that's a really good question. I believe that to future-proof our workforce, everyone in the ecosystem that you highlighted plays an important role. So firstly, there's a role for the employees. We need to help employees gain and demonstrate their skills. So it's not enough to identify the skills if we don't help them gain, develop, and demonstrate them. So we need to think about providing access to learning platforms where they can gain these skills. Building on our commitment with Microsoft, we've already helped 30 million people get reskilled for in-demand jobs. At LinkedIn, we're taking our commitment a step further with a new goal to help 250,000 companies make a skill-based hire in 2021 through our new and existing hiring products. Secondly, companies need to have a talent and culture of learning, like you mentioned, Fiona, that a lot of companies have already adopted. They can help them build a future-ready workforce. As companies transform their business, they need to help their employees pick up skills that will ensure they stay relevant. Many companies invest in internal training programs that help employees acquire skills that may not directly relate to their current job. In fact, our research shows that 8 in 10 companies want to hire from within, especially when they need an employee with an insider knowledge or perspective. Lastly, there's going to be a big mindset shift needed to change how companies hire and view candidates. Companies know they are missing out millions of amazing candidates by limiting themselves to applicants with traditional backgrounds like schools and previous work experience. But that's the system we're all grown up with. So as leaders within the community, we need to advocate for this change and democratize access to opportunity.
I couldn't agree more, and it's a really nice tie-in actually to the diversity and inclusion lens as well. But I know even my own experience in Microsoft over the last year, 2 years, we've put a lot more concerted energy into learning and actually giving people the space to learn. So whether that's creating learning days where it's dedicated time, also in thinking about the type of people and the skills we're hiring in, not to be so narrow in our thinking and really trying to broaden that. So switching gear a little, as we've said, digital technologies are the backbone. We know that of today's economies and the core to strengthen the recovery that we are all going through. However, women are actually really underrepresented in emerging roles in technology. We've seen that only 12% of professionals in cloud computing today are women, while in engineering it's at 15% and data and AI is at 26%. And about 15% of the world's population, that's 1 billion people, are living with some form of disability. So Fionn, in your view, how can we help tap into this talent pool and all of this potential? How can we provide accessibility to ensure that the productive potential of all groups are realised for an inclusive economic recovery?
Fiona, thank you for asking that question. I think it's at the heart of many people's mind. And in LinkedIn, our ultimate vision is to make sure every member of the global workforce has economic opportunity. A spirit of diversity, inclusion, and belonging is at the heart of many people, and it's at the heart so that no one of us gets left behind. As we recover from a challenging year, we can better support underrepresented groups for inclusive economic recovery. As you rightly pointed out, in APAC, only 4 in 10 companies' workforce comprise of women. Looking at leadership positions, representation is even lower. Only 3 in 10 of senior level positions are taken up by women. Companies can implement policies that better support women as they balance work and personal life, for example, flexible working hours. They can also be more intentional about how they invest in programs that help women pick up new skills to support their career growth. So I want to give you an example. Like in LinkedIn, we actually have a program called Empower In. Empower In is a leadership development program that we help high-performing women realize their full potential at the workplace. So apart from a series of learning courses that are curated for them, LinkedIn women in the program also get to hear from internal and external senior female leaders, and they get sponsorship from all of these senior leaders as well. And we can also do more to expand our hiring pool to include people with disabilities. So they have skills, but they may not necessarily be mobile. In fact, 4 in 10 companies are already willing to hire remote workers in the same country. So this is an opportunity for companies to hire more from this underrepresented group to enter the workplace. And we need to consider physical workplaces as well to make them more accessible for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think as difficult as the last year or two has been, I think it does open up some massive opportunities for people to think about how we can work differently. And I've also seen some fantastic programs, whether it's returning to work after maternity leave or people who've maybe taken a break and they want to come back and making sure that they've got the right skills. So I absolutely firmly believe there are things that we can do purposefully to have an impact here. So finally, Fionn, as we just wrap up, when we think about the audience that's here today, what do you see as the role that governments can play in really raising digital literacy, raising the employability index, and the impact that we can have with public-private partnerships?
Well, the vision I shared earlier to create skill-based approach to opportunity and hiring isn't a vision we can realize alone. It will require schools, employers, non-profit groups, and government agencies to connect and collaborate to create equal access to opportunity through skills. Governments and institutes of education can work with private companies to empower workers, both young and old. For example, we recently worked with Institute of Technical Education to equip students with the tools to market themselves with necessary skills required to kickstart their career. The students will have access to various learning paths on digital and future skills on LinkedIn Learning. And upon completion, students can add the skills and certificates to their LinkedIn profiles to enhance their employability upon graduation. They can also encourage the population to learn continuously through various programs. Like in Singapore, there is a professional conversion program, which allows mid-career professionals to undergo skills conversion and move them into new occupations. Finally, government and employers can all play a role in helping everyone realize that continuous learning is the way of life. Making courses available, creating opportunities for professionals to apply the skills that they acquire, and be open to hire based on skills versus past experiences in specific sectors will be important.
Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much, Fionn, for some of those insights. And it's really great to hear a little around how LinkedIn is thinking about this. I hope for everybody in the audience, you've gotten a sense of how important it's going to be for us to build the next generation of a skills-based economy, and also the culture that needs to be put in place in order to support that, as well as thinking broadly about diversity and inclusion as we think about skilling and the role that we can all play there. So thank you very much, Fionn, for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Fiona, for having me.
Thank you, Fiona and Fionn, for the insightful outlook into the future of employment and work, and importantly, making sure that diversity and inclusion are top of mind.
Healthcare has been a focus for us in the past 12 months, our heroes fighting at the front lines. Turning the lens now to our next panel on Health Renaissance, allow me to invite Dr. David Rue, Chief Medical Officer and Vice President for Healthcare at Microsoft.
As a father, I've seen firsthand the big challenges of online learning. My son, a freshman in high school, has spent the past year juggling countless tools just to do basic schoolwork. His class assignments are handed out on Zoom, study group messages come in on WhatsApp, documents are stored in Google Drive. And don't even get me started with online test taking. The question is, how can we ensure that teachers and students maximize technology to get their best learning experience? I'm Dr. Raymond Tsai with AppPoint. We're the largest data management solutions provider for Microsoft 365 and have worked closely with Microsoft in the last 20 years. We've helped many learning institutions across Asia to deliver a secure, collaborative, and holistic online learning platform. With AppPoint EduTech solution, teachers can deliver personalized, immersive, and collaborative learning powered by Microsoft 365. Our intuitive interface can automate lesson planning, exam creation, and grading. AppPoint EduTech is a one-stop shop solution that provides a student-centric learning management system with a personalized dashboard to easily attend courses and take exams, all from one place. Talk about simple. But we're also focused on safety. AppPoint EduTech can deliver secure online exams with intelligent proctoring enabled by Microsoft AI and screen monitoring for a comprehensive proctor oversight. The future of secure and collaborative online learning is here. I invite you to unleash the power of Microsoft 365 with AppPoint EduTech to take learning to the next level. Visit us at apppoint.com/edutech to learn more.
We're live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next session. I'm super excited to be joined by three outstanding world leaders in the area of healthcare and public health. From Malaysia, Dr. Fazila Sheikh Aludin. From Singapore, Professor Kee Wan Niam. And from New Zealand, Shane Hunter. Dr. Fazila is the Senior Deputy Director of the Planning Division at the Ministry of Health in Malaysia. Professor Niam is the Group Technology Officer at the National University Health System in Singapore. And Shane Hunter is the Deputy Director General of Data and Digital in the Ministry of Health in New Zealand. Today we'll be talking about several topics, but it'll really focus on three themes. The first is around empowering health and public health systems what are we doing today to address the COVID pandemic? What are our countries doing? What are the needs? And then as we think about that, we are thinking about what's ahead. What are the things that we've learned and how can we prevent future pandemics? And what is the transformation that has occurred digitally and allowing us to think about the possibilities? And then in the process, we want to make sure we don't leave behind several of the individuals that are most vulnerable. And that will be around prioritizing the health equities. So one of the things that we'd like to do is we'd like to just jump right into it and talk a bit now about some of the things that we have seen in terms of COVID and how each country has had a very specific response to that. And I'd like to start with you, Dr. Fazila. Please share with us a little bit about what Malaysia has done and how have you addressed the pandemic?
Thank you, David. And I'm very glad to be here on this panel. Actually, to date, we have about 420,000 positive cases and with mortality of 0.37. But for the last few months, we have seen a death rate, which is more than 100 cases per month. So that's quite worrying. And about 1% of our cases are admitted to ICU and 50% are ventilated. And right now we are experiencing a surge in the daily cases of more than 3,000 cases per day. And it's actually very worrying. A lot of states are experiencing overwhelmed health systems. And we have moved into lockdowns lately. But our response to public health interventions, I think is almost similar with many countries. Of course, the foundation is being active case detection and contact tracing and surveillance, diagnostic and testing, movement control orders. We still have very strict border control, isolation and treatments, our hospitals, low-risk centers and primary clinics. Of course, a lot of focus is also on strategic and risk communication and other evidence-based approaches. And this year, we have rolled out our national vaccination immunization program. And in fact, throughout this entire pandemic, digital technology is used widely and extensively for both the COVID-19 responses and also the vaccination program. And we are still in a state of emergency until August and various phases of movement control order. We were actually already moving towards recovery. We started to open up our economic, business, education, and social sector. But however, we are seeing again the surge and a lot of variants of concerns. So we are back to lockdowns. So that's what's happening here in Malaysia. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And one of the things that we oftentimes hear about is the economic impact that the lockdowns have, and in many organizations and many societies are very resistant to that. Can you share a bit about, maybe how has Malaysia addressed those concerns?
It's actually a very tough balancing act to balance life and livelihoods. As the cases were going down, we started to open up all the economic sector, social sector. But again, the cases are going up. This has been very tough. But government is also coming up with a lot of financial aids and financial stimulus package. We are trying to make sure the industry, the businesses, the informal sector, is sustained. But it's very tough. It's really very tough. And the poverty level is also, I think, not only here, in many countries, I think will have increased by now. Yeah.
Yeah. Professor Niam from Singapore, could you tell us a bit about what has been Singapore's response to the pandemic?
For inviting me to this panel. I'm really honored to be here. I think that the responses are not dissimilar to what we are doing. Dr. Fazila was describing is being done in Malaysia. In Singapore, I think we are neighboring countries, and certainly we coordinate extensively in terms of how we manage the pandemic. I suppose to just look at some differences, I think one of the things that we did was very early on was to implement a trace and track mechanism. So we have, to that end, we have implemented a trace together kind of token. So it comes in two forms. So one is a physical device that you could carry with you, and the other is an app that you can put in your phone. So these devices have the ability to track only the people who are in the vicinity of the user, not the actual GPS locations of the user itself. So I think from the privacy concern area, so that's something that has been continuously reinforced in the last couple of months. And just last week, we had, unfortunately, a second sort of wave of small clusters coming out throughout the country. And we think that it's most likely to be a sort of imported type of case that for some reason has went into the community. But using this trace together type of technology, we are able to very quickly contain these clusters, swab everybody, and contain the second and third generation spread of the virus to the community. So I think one of the key things that we have done in the last year that really helped with the control of the pandemic is to be able to implement these tracing and controlling type measures to prevent community spread. I think it'd be worth talking a little bit about vaccination as well. So currently we have in Singapore about 70% of the elderly population that is above 60 years old being vaccinated. We are going to the next phase where we'll be vaccinating the 45 to the 60-year-olds, and slowly we'll be propagating to those who are of lower risk. Of course, all the high risk type of professions, i.e. the healthcare workers, the airport workers, we're looking at about a 96% vaccination rate. And I think that's the other part of the strategy, which is to ensure that the people at risk get vaccinated first, so as to reduce the potential of complications in this group of essential workers. So I think that the third area to kind of mention is the balance between opening up and really reviving economic activity versus the measures that we are taking. I'm sure we will talk a bit more about this later, but one of the key lessons learned is we should open up progressively and not suddenly, because that would result in increased risk of community spread and uncontrolled transmissions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shane, could you share a little bit about what's been going on in New Zealand?
Yes, kia ora, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Nice to meet everybody. Yes, look, we had an elimination strategy, which was basically to keep it out, find it, and stamp it out. That was the original elimination strategy for us. We're an island nation, so we fortunately have great control over our border, and part of our strategy was controlling entry to our border. So our borders were shut down fairly quickly. At one stage, obviously, it was very difficult for people to get here anyway because of disruptions, I guess, to flights around the world and stuff like that. Surveillance, we did a lot of testing of the population just to see if we could identify, as in find it. Obviously, public health measures in terms of physical distancing and so forth were really important. Contact tracing for us is previously quite a manual process, but it is a very person-orientated process. So we were very careful to make sure that the technology that we brought to bear was to support contact tracing and not to replace contact tracing as we know it. Obviously, isolating people who were close contacts or who had been tested positive was part of it. And then we've sort of progressively over time enhanced the technology from a surveillance point of view and a reporting point of view. And one of the things I think in New Zealand that's been very helpful for us is around genome sequencing and enabling us to work out, what we're actually dealing with where we have cases in the community. Unlike Dr. Fazila, it's in New Zealand we just had 50,000 people at a concert about 3 weeks ago. So some of life in New Zealand is very much business as usual. I think the the economics of it have not been anywhere near as bad as we anticipated, but it would be fair to say that the tourism industry and many of the services industries, particularly bars and restaurants, have probably been the most affected. But in the main, we don't really have very many community cases. We've just opened up our travel bubbles, and yes, to Professor Naum's point, I think progressively opening up the borders is very much the strategy of our government, being very, very cautious at the moment. And I think our challenge there is just understanding joint country protocols so that we can actually sustain the bubble when, we may have the odd case that in the community. But pretty much everything we're catching at the border at the moment. So it's, I think we've been successful in that regard. Vaccinations just started early for us, and we've targeted our border workers and families of border workers and our health workers and families of health workers, and then moving to our vulnerable populations, particularly elderly. And I know we'll talk about it a bit later, but we've also had an equity lens on it as well. So looking at some of the people that would often be left out. So, yeah.
Incredible. And I know that the bubble that you've created to allow for entry between New Zealand and Australia is something that people are looking at quite a bit right now. You mentioned testing, genomic testing. Can you describe a little bit about, is testing done on just symptomatic, or do you do routinely asymptomatic testing as well?
Generally speaking, symptomatic, but there has been some asymptomatic testing, particularly where we have cases that are close contact. So you may not be symptomatic, but in terms of our close contact, we will get you tested. So typically symptomatic, but in the case of community outbreaks, which we haven't had too many, we do some asymptomatic as well.
Also curious, Professor Fazla, same thing in your country as well?
Yeah, I mean, of course, testing is done for contacts, close contacts, but we also do surveillance in all our influenza-like illness clinics, and also community screening and point of entry screening. We also do targeted screening for pre-op cases, healthcare workers, and brought-in death cases, and also at workplace. And then some of the mass screening is done when there's an outbreak in clusters, and also detention center. At one point we started to see a lot of foreign workers workplace, and also detention centers, very high cases, and old folks home. So it's both of symptomatic and screening. We do both.
Yep. We had a question from the audience that was reflective of some of the concerns that we've had relative to the impact it's had on parents and teachers, and certainly return to school has been a central part of that. Professor, in your country, have you found that the ability to bring the kids back to school has had an impact, and how did you approach that?
I think in Singapore, we are quite fortunate that from about May last year, we've had schools functioning fully, continuously till now. And essentially, there's always been a pandemic plan where students could sort of have home-based education. But we know that this is not effective, because students, children need to go to school to have the full experience of education. So actually, from when we ended our circuit breaker last year in about end of May, June, we essentially have had students back at school continuously since then. So what's happened in the last week is that there has been one case of a student being infected, and that triggered a mass swabbing. And for one school, it was they were asked to have home-based learning, but for the rest of schools, we still continue to function. So I think the impact in Singapore in terms of education is lower, because the policy is that is driven by the science, which is young people, children in general, do not suffer the ill effects of COVID as much as adults. So because of that principle, we have kept our schools running in the last year or so. Yeah.
And was testing a part of the return to school effort? Was it just masks and social distancing and good ventilation?
Yeah, it's more the latter. The testing that we do is very selective for schools because, again, the risk is lower. However, on other fronts, like what Dr. Fazila said, so for dormitory workers in Singapore, we had a big cluster of dormitory workers last year. That was almost under constant surveillance since the end of the circuit breaker we had last year. And indeed, we are doing random screenings of dormitory workers because, like many institutions, whether they are nursing homes or detention facilities, these are enclosed environments where the spread can be really quick if you don't pick it up early. So we do random kind of screenings in these institutions.
Professor, you had mentioned some of the digital tools that have been used for the contact tracing. We also know that during the pandemic, a significant amount of care has been delivered virtually. Curious if you could just share some of your thoughts in terms of how has that gone? Do you see that continuing?
Absolutely, David. I cannot emphasize this more. Right? There's been a saying from last year that who made the biggest change to digital transformation? Was it the CTO, the CEO, or is it COVID? Right? So in this case, it rings really true because I remember in 2019 we were trying so hard to roll out teleconsultation. There was a lot of resistance. There was a lot of mindset that around needing to see the doctor physically. But COVID came along and all that changed, right? So we have now entire programs to have people go on teleconsultation with us. So roughly we are seeing about 20 to 30% of people going on to teleconsults rather than wanting to come to meet us in person. This fluctuates a bit because I think that the overhang of the mindset of needing to see the doctor physically still exists. Nevertheless, with the heightened awareness of potential second or even third waves, I think teleconsultation is here to stay. And we are indeed trying to further the technological possibilities with teleconsult to include things like telemonitoring and telecare. In other words, you are able to do care from a distance. So this would be applicable to things like cognitive behavioral therapy, so mental health kind of intervention, rather than actual physical tablets and actual physical therapies. So I think teleconsultation and telecare is going to be is here to stay, and we certainly have to look forward to streamlining the processes by adopting things like cloud technology, for example.
Shane, curious, New Zealand, could you talk a bit about the digital transformation? Have you seen the acceleration? What do you think the impact is long term? Oh, a question for Shane.
There we go. If I go off mute, that would help. Still haven't mastered that after all this time. So look, we obviously had a big shift to teleconsultation through COVID because you didn't have any option. We'd pretty much shut down access to to a doctor or to a specialist. We have reverted back a little bit. I think partly because we weren't in lockdown for long enough for people to sustain it. But what we have had is a series of investment programs across the system to look at how we can actually continue and build on what we got through COVID. I mean, I was just talking to one of our general practices today, 65% of their consultations are now virtual and video. Quite a number of our practices are virtual but telephone. And we actually have a lot of consultation via our clinical portals, which is text-based, asynchronous communication, which is increasing quite considerably. So it absolutely did accelerate it. Some stuff has been sustained. What it's really done for us is made us realise that it's not that difficult to use the technology these days. Apart from the odd person who can't hit the mute button correctly, people are finding it quite easy to use. If we had a fear of using it, now we have a sort of can-do attitude towards it. So I think we've broken through a bit of a barrier. We definitely have patients that are demanding it. Our work, I guess, is much more at the clinical end, how we optimize the integration of some of the technologies into the core sort of systems that help them manage. So our booking systems for our clinics and stuff like that. But, you know, we have more than enough evidence to know that we need to carry on and continue to accelerate. So I agree that COVID's done the work. It's up to us to sustain it.
Dr. Fazila, Singapore.
But I would think that, as mentioned by Prof. and Shane, I mean, virtual care is here to stay. In fact, I think it's going to be the trend. The demand is, I mean, we are having more and more hospitals requesting for virtual clinics, requesting for funding and hardware and so forth. But at the same time, the demand is also coming from the people, because of the fear of going to hospital. So this definitely will stay. And I think COVID has also pushed the people to the society to become a digital society. You know, right now everyone is using the phone for check-ins, for online shopping, for groceries, even birthdays and weddings. So I think this rapid expansion and adoption of digital platform and services will affect all sectors. And I think all sectors are scrambling actually to provide services using technology. Yeah, so whatever that we have not seen for years, now we are seeing in months happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Fazila, I'm curious, sometimes we see in our desire to move quickly with technology that sometimes individuals are left behind because of either lack of broadband, lack of training, understanding, capabilities, access, affordability. I'm wondering if you see any of these disparities in Singapore.
Oh, in Malaysia.
Or Malaysia, I'm sorry. Yep.
Okay. Yes, no doubt. I think digital divide has become more apparent during this pandemic, especially when we are doing virtual care, virtual school and so forth. We have witnessed it. We have seen it in Malaysia also. And I think the virtual healthcare, virtual education for rural areas has been a challenge. If I'm not mistaken, there is a digital inclusion index which was done by Roland Burgess for the Southeast Asia, and I think Malaysia is behind Singapore. Singapore is number 1, of course, and at a global level we rank 21. So I think we lag behind in terms of accessibility and affordability in some areas. And I think closing this gap is very important now, especially when we are moving towards this new normal where everything is virtual. So Malaysia has recently launched the Digital Economy Blueprint, where a lot of focus is on connectivity, infrastructure, and closing the digital gap. So I really hope that moving forward, everyone will have access. And but I will also think that digital trust and digital literacy also plays an important role in this. In this new normal. Yeah.
And as we look ahead, Professor, curious your thoughts in terms of the role of cloud-based technologies, artificial intelligence. Do you see that playing a significant part of both the current and future role of how we can better address these pandemics?
Yeah, absolutely, David. I think that whilst we talk about the digital divide and things like that, we really would see this general trend to what's going online by virtue of the COVID pandemic. However, when we go online, it's not just a simple thing of when you turn up, you provide a service and everything is hunky-dory, right? So there are quite a number of technical considerations when you go online. So the first key consideration is security. So when you go online, and especially going to cloud-based systems, you have to consider the security. That's the first precondition. But once you get past security, right, you actually have a wide open space to innovate and to deliver services that would otherwise have cost a lot more or take a long time to bring into fruition. So examples of that would be teleconsultation. How can we schedule appointments automatically rather than having a call center operator do it for you? Provision of medical information. Can we provide better information to our patients without needing somebody else on the other end of the line. And we can think about all the other new AI services that are coming online, right? So we think about remote diagnosis using AI to, say, for example, diagnose certain conditions. So if you put all of them together, and if you executed each of these programs and services individually on a standalone hardware or on-premise hardware, it's going to be massively expensive, and not that it's not scalable, right? So moving under the cloud, provided that the instances are secure, will allow you to scale up and scale out into various types of use functions. So an example of this would be use of a chatbot, for example, right? So a AI-empowered chatbot would be capable of delivering service functions like appointment making, medication refills, and so on and so forth, as well as to provide chat services to users through a very familiar interface, right? People have been using messaging apps for a very, very long time, and this is nothing new. So the only difference is that on the back end, you are able to scale up the services through the power of cloud. So I think adopting cloud as a fundamental part of your healthcare digital strategy is key to being able to realize all the pandemic level services that you want to provide.
Excellent. Shane, curious your thoughts relative to the type of infrastructure that's required to support pandemic response.
I won't take it off. Look, I agree with the point about cloud. I mean, we were in the cloud, or certainly on the journey to the cloud. Much of New Zealand, in terms of government organisations and health organisations, were already on the journey and were able to leverage that straight away. I guess for us, the key thing is to actually connect all the different information about patients and make that accessible. One of the things that we found was that general practice in New Zealand was looking for what we called surge capacity, and our ability to support that was really constrained by the fact that we don't have access to all the information on a patient through a single screen, if you like. We have a lot of digitised information in New Zealand, but getting it connected in a way that's interoperable is really, really going to be part of how we deal with that in the future, I think. I mean, I'm particularly interested in technologies like AI. I mean, our systems are full of people that our health system, particularly our hospital systems, are fairly loaded with people that probably don't need to be there. These are people that would rather not physically visit, or these are people that we could triage using smart technology to avoid the need to come in at all and prioritise those people that really need to be there. So I think for me, getting better at using AI, getting much more personalised about how we deliver health is going to be really important in the future as well.
That's an excellent point. So really talking about how we can optimize care, make sure that we can allocate the most appropriate precious resources to those who need it the most. We've oftentimes seen the challenge of limited resources and proper allocation, which gets to the whole issue around how data needs to be exchanged. Shane, I'm curious your thoughts. Data interoperability, was that an issue at all? What do you see the role of that is being a key part of how we deploy these technologies?
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of points. One is in New Zealand, we have a national health index, which is an identifier for every patient. We don't have a New Zealand sort of national identifier number, but for health we do. And that enables us to join up the data. It's more the physical process of joining it up. Now, in saying that, we do have challenges where, for example, because it's not interoperable from a standards point of view, I can see medicines prescribed and I can see medicines dispensed, but I've got to actually correlate those in a manual way. That's great. It's a good start. But how do we bring that information together so it's much more meaningful, and then we can apply, algorithms to that information? So for us, getting the standards embedded into systems is a big part of our strategy. But we're not on a strategy for a single electronic health record. We're on a strategy for a virtual electronic health record. So joining up the various pieces of information that are across the system. So it's a big part of the New Zealand strategy going forward. It's pretty fundamental to optimising healthcare and data generally, in terms of showing us where we can improve, showing us where the equity gaps are, enabling us to prioritize the right patients, optimizing how we plan. I mean, data is a currency that we need to leverage big time going forward.
Absolutely. Dr. Fazila, there's a question from the audience. I think it's something that perhaps you may have an opinion on. It's about how do we better the experience for clinicians and hospitals as we push digital transformation when the basic infrastructure is still not there and remains fragmented. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, we in Malaysia, a lot of our hospitals are still manual. About 30%, only 30% has full systems. But of course, I think hospital information systems and also giving the right tools to the clinicians will actually improve their work. At the same time, I think whatever we are doing or designing, it's very important to have the clinicians' input or the users' input in designing it. I think that will really improve the design. But at the same time, we must not forget the patients. What do they get out of this digital transformation in hospitals and clinic? We must also improve their experience, and they must feel that their data. It's about they must feel safe and they must trust the digital transformation that we are doing. So I think it is everyone must be involved in this entire design or move towards the agenda of digital transformation.
Absolutely. We are closing in on the close of the session. It's been an incredible discussion, so many amazing insights. But I want to close with your thoughts, some final thoughts regarding some opportunities and challenges for digital health and artificial intelligence as we look ahead. I'd like to start with you, Professor. Your thoughts regarding those opportunities and challenges that we can think of as we look to expand our digital health technologies and to look to deploy them to build better and more fortified structures.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question. I think I'm passionate about this where based on that question that was asked from the audience about how we can better push digital transformation when basic infrastructure is still not there. So I think you can look at that as a tremendous opportunity. You could leapfrog generations and millions of dollars of legacy, EHR systems and go to the cloud. I think that's my message been for the last half hour or so, which is you can radically transform your organization in a very short amount of time with relatively fewer resources and go to the cloud to access all the services on the proviso that the security aspects that are looked after, because of course your patients and the doctors want to ensure that the data is secure and you can run these services securely, and that will allow you to then scale up and scale out on the cloud and do what I'll call meet in the cloud, as it were, because you still have to have interagency collaborations. You still have legacy sort of IT infrastructure. So, but the common meeting place in terms of services and security would be cloud-based. That's my thoughts about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane, I know you had mentioned that New Zealand is actively looking at these topics, cloud infrastructure. Where do you see the opportunities and challenges for digital health and artificial intelligence?
I mean, the opportunities are immense, to be honest. I mean, you couldn't be at a better, in a better time and a better place, to be honest, in terms of what's available today. I mean, I've often said that. I mean, I started my career in IBM many years ago now, and we used to talk about what was coming. Now it's about what's there that you can use today. It's really about your imagination in terms of the opportunity. And for us, I guess what we want to do at a national level is ensure that we have all the enabling services available to enable us to really leverage. So identity for us is very important. We think if we can resolve patient identity, then there's a lot that we can actually offer people in a secure and private way. So that's one of our opportunities, but equally is one of our challenges. I think we, to be honest, we have people that are still getting their head around the art of what's possible. So we need to move from tell to show. I think the beauty of these platforms today is you can very quickly configure and show someone something that's possible, create an MVP, build out from there, which again is the beauty of the cloud and the platforms. So moving away from a very traditional sort of way of working to be much more agile, continuous in terms of our delivery and integration. The co-design, I think, is a very important part of it, whether it's with consumers or with the health professionals. And I do think trust and open dialogue are very, very important as well, because as much as we believe it, there are still people who are not so sure, and so we have to bring them on the journey. So I think we can move rapidly and bring people with us, but we have to be cautious about taking too big a leap too fast around some of the very exciting stuff.
Excellent. Dr. Fazila, you have the final word on this as well. Your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, the opportunity is immense. I don't have to repeat it. Prof. and Shane has mentioned it. But my concern is more of the challenge. I think digital transformation is not about just technology. We must address people, we must address processes, and we must also address policies and regulation to facilitate this transformation to happen. So I think new challenges, ethical challenges, legal challenges are also there. And a lot of challenges around data governance and data stewardship. I think it's moving forward. That will be also a topic that we must look at. So basically, digital transformation is all about the business, transforming the business. It's not merely a technology issue. Yeah.
Thank you. I could go on, and I would love to, but I know they're going to give me the hook here. So to my three panelists, it's been a real pleasure to join you for this conversation, and I look forward to future ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Shane, Dr. Fazila, Professor Niam, and Dr. David. It's amazing to see the fast adoption of technology and how different countries adopted new ways to manage the crisis at the front line, and some great steps to reform the healthcare system and build for resilience. All right, with that, we would like to bring our last panel discussion for the day on innovation and industry transformation. Let's discuss some of the exciting innovation happening in different industries. So let's welcome our panel host, Sherry Ng, General Manager, Public Sector, Microsoft Asia Pacific. Sherry, take it over.
Imagine a future where we use data analytics to drive change for a more equitable world, where your new products launch at the pace that your consumer preferences change, where governments of the world collaborate to create better social outcomes for their citizens. EY and Microsoft are realizing that future now. EY and Microsoft's relationship is unique. Two industry leaders who are partners and customers of each other. Microsoft technology is critical to EY, from how we work to how we serve our clients. EY has deep capabilities on Microsoft technologies that help our clients solve their biggest problems and innovate with confidence. Together, EY and Microsoft deliver transformations driven by people and powered by technology. Whether that's a new driver that quickly needs pay-as-you-go car insurance, a tax accountant asked to run a last-minute analysis and still make it home in time for dinner, or the concerned social worker that is trying to assess risk for her new case across disparate government and agency data. Our portfolio of innovation solutions help ensure that technology transformation and innovation meet genuine needs. The world is changing. Are you ready? EY and Microsoft can help you accelerate that change. Together, we deliver transformations driven by people and powered by technology.
Good morning and welcome to our panel on the role of innovation on industry transformation. The 4.0 Industrial Revolution is changing the way we live, learn, and do business at an unprecedented rate. And this is further compounded, with the global crisis caused by COVID-19. In the last 12 months, we saw how the pandemic was a catalyst that challenged our existing views, spurred by new perspectives push the boundaries on technology, changes in business model, and accelerated innovation. Today, we're super privileged to have leaders of various industries to discuss with us on how innovation is shaping our future. So honored, this morning we have Jimmy Ng, the Group Chief Information Officer, as well as the Head of Group Technology and Operations at DBS, known to be Southeast Asia's largest bank. And Jimmy is passionate about reimagining banking so that our customer can live more and bank less. Welcome, Jimmy, and congratulations to the recent record performance.
Thank you for having me here, Sherry.
Thank you. And then next up, we have Adrian Ashley, Chief Digital Officer of Petronas, as well as the CEO of Petronas Group Digital. Adrian is a veteran in Petronas and led different business units, all the way from downstream, upstream, midstream to retail. His deep expertise span across the oil and gas business. Good morning, and very glad to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here, Sherry. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, last but not least, we have a lovely lady joining us all the way from Korea, Lim Yiling. She heads up 500 Startup Global Innovation Team for Asia Pacific. Yiling is also the co-founder and CEO of Smarter Me, an education platform that equips children with the skill set, mindset, but more importantly, the heart set to define their own success and happiness. Welcome, Yiling.
Thank you, Sherry. So glad to be here.
Yeah, you see, the future is coming, and in the last 12 months, we talk about how this future is accelerating even faster, and COVID is really the impetus of accelerated change. So maybe we start, to get your views on how, to share with us your journey on how innovation has happened and accelerated through the COVID era. Maybe we start with Jimmy.
Thanks, Sherry. I think, COVID has been, one incredible year for us. And what we actually went through last year, a lot of the things that we have done in the last 7 years of digital transformation really put us in a very good position for us to actually tackle COVID head on. And the kind of work that we do, for example, I can give you a few data points. The ability for us to actually move our staff, the 29,000 staff, from office and move them to work from home. And remember, I think this has never been done before. It has never been in our playbook, even for our BCP. And the ability for us to actually do all this was a result of all the investment that we have done over the last 7 years. Now we have a mobility first philosophy, and equipping all our staff with laptops. And the ability for us to actually ramp up our whole entire VPN, VDI capacity overnight. As a result of all the modern technology that we have actually put in place over the last 7 years. And not to mention that a lot of the work that we do for our data platform has also enabled us to actually use data to help us with contact tracing. One of the things that we did, and I thought it's worth mentioning here, is the ability for us to actually take data from an O365 calendar and being able to actually correlate with the other information of your door tab as well as your Wi-Fi usage, and be able to create a contact tracing app within 3 days. And that actually came in very handy when we actually had our first case of COVID infection. The ability for us to actually reach out, find out who has been in close contact, and for both our staff and our customer, and be able to actually lend our assistance. So all this technology and all this capability was a result of all the work that we have done in the last 7 years. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is that the ability for us to actually work very closely with the business. We have been on the agile journey for the last 7 years as well. And we actually adopted the two-in-the-box structure, having technology as well as a business coming together, co-owning a platform. And because of that, we're able to respond very nimbly to our customers' requirements as well. So really, I think if you think about the whole entire COVID situation, if it's really giving you the clarity of your purpose, right, in terms of what needs to be done. and the alignment of the resources and the coalition of the willing, to actually come together to actually respond. And in my mind, this is actually a very key ingredient, for innovation to happen.
Very nice. I know innovation always driven from a customer-centric perspective. Maybe we turn our lens to Yiling.
Yeah, I think so. At 500, we actually work with a lot of governments and corporates on corporate innovation and growth. I would actually categorize the COVID-19 situation and impact in 3 stages. So I think I have a slide if you could just pull that up as well. The 3 stages are really react, respond, and rethink. So initially, we saw a halt in budgets. Everything was on hold as focus was really on survival. And then when they moved to the response stage, we saw partners responding by prioritizing adoption of technologies that have a direct productivity impact. So either boosting sales or reducing costs. And they were very quick to seize new prevalent opportunities. So in that sense, I think it's definitely accelerated the adoption of digital tools. But in the last 6 months, with the prolonged effect, thankfully, we've actually started seeing some partners rethink their business for the far out, really looking for solutions which could become the next business unit, the next revenue line for them. What's also interesting is the trickle-down effect that we've seen within government. So it's no longer just the startup-facing agencies that are undertaking startup programs and ecosystem development, but also, your statutory boards, your industry agencies. They are paving the way as a catalyst for change in every industry, from utilities to education.
Thank you, Yiling. I want to hold your thoughts there about rethinking. We're going to come back and talk a lot about that. Maybe just to Adrian, tell us about the COVID journey.
Thanks, Sherry. I guess it's almost it reflects a lot of what Jimmy is saying, almost beat to beat, in the sense that we think of it as really a combination of both necessity and also some forethought and planning. Necessity because we just had to work from home. And I think just for Petronas, we've almost exclusively been working from home ever since last April. And for me as well, since taking this role, I've never been in the office and met my team physically. So I've exclusively been working from home in this capacity, right? And COVID, I guess, has pushed the necessity to accelerate a 22-year program and to be able to do it within months. Right? So, but in order for us to enable to do this, this is where the planning comes in. I think just to reflect what Jimmy has said as well, it's the transformation and the programs that we've put in the last 3 years or so that's put us in this ability to make this journey happen, right? It's about connectivity. For example, the work that we did in pervasive wireless and creating all that network to enable the data to be transferred, putting in a data lake to organize the data. With more data, we need to be able to put it on cloud. So it's part of our cloud journey as well that we're accelerating. And of course, with more data, more transparency, security comes into play as well. So this is all about enhancing the cybersecurity adoption and also the customer experience. So in a large part, it is really driven by necessity to accelerate the pace, but it's possible because of the planning and the foresight that we've put in. Sherry.
Thank you, Adrian. I think I hear a common theme between all three. This duration of wave of change is actually shrinking. In the past, we see how the lab code, mainframe era lasted for a good 30 years. Mini computer took 20. Internet 1.0 is 10. And Adrian, you talk about the cloud journey, the digital mobility has changed every dimension, in maybe just 5 years, and if not 5 months. There's a famous saying by Peter Dementis about how every industry will be transformed and reinvented in the next 10 years. So maybe let's hear from your perspective about that change. And Yiling, you talk about rethinking. Maybe we start with you.
Great. So what's really interesting, I think, is that we're seeing a convergence of a particular way of thinking amongst corporates and startups. And you've actually used that term earlier on as well, Sherry, and that is customer centricity. But what's interesting is that not as a buzzword, but really adopting customer centricity as the starting point and spark for all new innovation. So just to give you an example, right? Insurers and financial institutions, they are rethinking about their customers' lives, the decision points within, and how, as a bank or an insurer, how do you grow with your customers? How do you serve them better? And then they start investing in healthcare, wellness, education, everything that really revolves around a customer's life. We have telcos whose subscribers are the younger generation. They start looking into the changing life cycles and habits of millennials and Gen Zs. For example, they see increasing pet ownership with the Gen Zs and millennials, and then they invest in pet care and pet telehealth, tying into that services. Why is it so fascinating? Because consumers and customers' behaviors are changing. And so successful innovation can really only happen when you're keeping an eye out on the new consumer value and new consumption behaviors. Also, I think in today's world with digital connectivity, the consumers of today honestly are spoiled, right? We have accessibility unlike before. We can compare anything and we can get things from anywhere. So if we're able to access goods and services with similar functionality at any price point, what's left to differentiate a business is really customer experience and an aligned brand proposition. So thinking about your customer, what is it that they value? Do they value diversity and inclusion? Do they value sustainability? And then as a business and a brand, how do you create that alignment with consumers? I think that whole movement is really fascinating and really exciting in terms of innovation.
Thank you, Eileen. You're always passionate about let's start from the customer lens and what they need, not just for today, but definitely the future. Adrian, maybe let's hear from you because the energy equation is critical and fundamental to every fabric of our business. How would you say, how energy is reimagining the future?
Thanks, Sherry. I think the disruption will come also from trying to be more customer-centric. If you think about the energy industry or the oil industry, right, by and large, it's a supply-led industry. The name of the game is always trying to find the oil, being able to transport it and monetize it at the cheapest way possible, right? The caricature of the typical oil man is this macho, greasy man riding off into the pioneer, looking for the next big oil field, right? But I think what's really facing the challenge, I guess, for the energy industry is, again, to pivot it to be a more customer-centric, demand-led or market-led on what is the market's requirement and what is their definition of energy. How will they consume it? It's really about creating solutions rather than just transporting resource and selling it, right? It's about thinking about solutions. How can we make it cleaner, for example? And what is deemed to be energy? Is it fossil fuel? Is it other sorts of energy? And what is the, I guess, interfaces in providing that energy? So just to give a simple example, Sherry, because I'm from the downstream sector before, right? We always think of when we drive cars, we go to a retail station because we pump fuel there. Then we think, EV is coming, simple, same retail station. Instead of fuel, we put an electric charger. But we need to think about customer behavior, right? If it takes 30 minutes or so to charge a car, for example, would they still do it at a petrol station, right? Or would they consume that energy maybe in other venues like malls and cinemas or even in their own homes? So I think these are the things that is really changing, and we are forced to relook at the energy, what is deemed to be energy, and what is customer behavior in consuming this energy. Sherry.
Thank you, Adrian. And indeed, from a supply-led moving into a demand lens, and you have that opportunity to get so much closer to your end consumer and really understand. I would definitely not sit 30 minutes and wait for my EV vehicles to be charged. I would expect that somebody schedule it, while I'm having that nice show, the vehicle is being charged. Thank you. And Jimmy, banking has been in the forefront, especially during this pandemic. There's lots of discussion about financial inclusion. There's lots of discussion about how you're changing and you are actually performing a lot better in the season. Tell us how, Jimmy, we are reimagining the banking arena?
So I think, Sherry, I think customer centricity has always been in the forefront for the banking industry. I mean, we are a service industry, and having to service customer, we always got to put ourselves in the customer's shoes. So that has always been in the forefront. To us, it's a given. I think what we see in the last 12 to 18 months was this digital adoption that none of us will probably have anticipated. The digital adoption has always been growing very steadily. But I think in the last 12 to 18 months, what we have seen is a huge spike in digital adoption. In segments which we always thought that would be quite difficult for them to actually bring them to the digital channel. But I'll tell you, this group of people is going to be there and they're going to be sticky, having experienced the convenience of digital servicing. So I think that that's one big shift that we're actually looking at. And a second big shift in the whole entire industry is really thinking about ecosystem play. In the whole entire supply chain disruption that we see, and because of the way that we actually do trade finance, they're all very paper-based, and therefore you realize that the way that we actually start looking at the lubrication of trade finance, people are fundamentally rethinking and coming together to actually really look at how we can actually use ecosystem using blockchain to be able to provide that kind of solutions. But I'll tell you that, this is one big area in which that, has a very big impetus. Mainly because after, prior to the COVID, a lot of people, are unwilling to actually be part of the ecosystem because they want to actually start their own ecosystem. And realize that, in this environment, everybody got to come together and actually be one big part of one big ecosystem, right? So I think that's another area of shift that we're looking at. And the third area of shift is really in the mindset. And people are beginning to actually look at technology quite differently, right? We actually use the example of blockchain. And to me, blockchain is always a technology that has been there all this while. It's a solution looking for a problem. And the COVID-19 situation really gave you that problem to be solved. And the ability for us to actually use technology in a very, very different way, in a very innovative way, I think that sort of bring us, to this whole entire innovation wave, that we're seeing in finance. And to me, I think that those are the things in which that, is going to bode very well for our customers because they're going to actually get better servicing from the banks.
Absolutely spot on. I think, Jimmy, you talk about digital adoption is very, very different in this season. You see everyone, even, down in the hawkers, the aunties and uncles, know how to use pay now, pay la, and pretty much, have gotten on the ride, with this digital explosion. So thank you, Jimmy, for that. Maybe let's just move on. We talk a lot about technology. We talk a lot about how a lot of these great opportunities come because of the availability of technology. But there's even a more powerful lens when you actually apply multiple exponentially advancing technologies together. The world calls this the collision of exponential technological growth. And this really gives us an ability to amplify power and possibility. We used to think that, hey, 1 + 1 may get us to 3. But in this era, we have the opportunity to look at 1 + 1 getting us to 1,000, because of all this collision. It's bringing on a totally new consumer expectation. A new culture is being, built, and businesses, as you all said it, needs to rethink the new business model. And some of you touch a little bit on the role of partnership. Maybe let's look at this in a deeper light. Adrian, can you share with us how this is shaping that culture, in your environment?
Well, Sherry, I think if one thing that COVID and the pandemic has shown us, it's really accelerated in terms of the technology and innovation, right? But I think with it comes also uncertainty in terms of the risk and the ability to make longer term decisions on your own. So if there's one thing that perhaps I'm a big exponent of, and I think which is not really keeping pace, is the business models, the partnership constructs, and the commercial constructs that should be driving this innovation, right? The tech stacks and the technology is moving fast, but the ability of the key partners to come together, I think this is where the next wave of innovation, and we shouldn't discount this, right? Just like we see the about 10 years ago, where the innovation in terms of the investment constructs between the VCs and the startups really gave birth to the boom of this whole startup wave. I think the next one is really harnessing the power of large corporates, startups, technology providers, and really rethinking about the risk rewards, right? How do we think about investments? Is it just going to be a traditional user versus a vendor contract, or is it really about sharing more of risk rewards? I think this is what I'm a big proponent of. For example, just to give an example, we worked with 500 2 years ago, two years ago, Iling, to really look at what Petronas can do with 500, for example, to unlock potential of Malaysian startups to help us in our journey, and which also gave birth to some of our VC plays. So that's a start. I would love to see a lot more of this. And I think if we push more into this innovation space, that's where we're going to accelerate that 1 + 1 = 3, Sherry.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jimmy, I think, this exponential multiplication of technology collision is coming on the onset. And a lot of people out there are actually very interested to see, what is DBS doing and how you're reimagining the future. But more importantly, what is the role of blockchain, crypto, and, the digital currency for the new economy? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier on, I think blockchain has really been has really taken off, in this post COVID pandemic situation, and mainly because it's a solution for proof of value, proof of obligation, proof of transactions, and proof of identity. And if you think about just these 4 use cases, there are a lot of use cases that you can actually think of. So, for example, we actually started this digital exchange that actually give us the ability to raise to do fundraising using tokenized assets, and we actually started up the custody services as well, and also enable through the platform secondary trading. And I'll tell you that there's a lot of interest in terms of looking at tokenized assets. So that's actually one good use case. The second good use case, I think, if I've seen in our announcement in last week as well, is the launch of Apatio. It's basically a blockchain, a cryptocurrency-based settlement systems. And I'll tell you that this is going to be another area in which that you will see a rapid pickup in terms of people using alternative currencies for settlement and trade financing. And the last thing, as I mentioned earlier on, is around this use of blockchain for secure ecosystems. So I think more and more you will see a lot of these blockchain technology coming to the fore, and really thinking about it from a very, very different perspective. The COVID situation has really unlocked the imagination of many people, and I think that's why you actually do that. And the other areas that you probably can see the intersection of technology is really in the area of 5G, AR, VR, IoT, and overlay that with AI, ML. And what you will see is that there is a lot of possibilities in the way we're going to service our customers. So the innovation is really constrained by your imagination. And in DBS, what we've been doing is actually experimenting with all these technologies and bringing that to the forefront to our business to be able to use that and experiment with them to actually bring up more use cases for them.
I love what you just said, right? It has unlocked our imagination, and everybody now has a different mindset that you're willing to experiment because new consumer, new ways of doing things are evolving every day. Thank you, Jimmy. Eileen, recently I was super inspired by an article that I read in Forbes, the Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia Startup, where, the headlines read that youngsters are unshackling business using AI and making it to the Forbes list. I read in India, Rao was able to develop AI tool that can summarize legal and corporate documents and be able to charge a lot of money to the tax and law firms. In Afghanistan, it was even more exciting. 5 young teenage girls were developing low-cost, lightweight ventilators to treat COVID patients. This is really super inspiration and how the technology is intersecting to break the boundaries and barriers, to give everyone a fair chance. We'd love to hear, you work with all sorts of startups. We'd love to hear some exciting stories from your front in Asia.
Yeah. Well, there's actually honestly so many exciting innovation and advancement that it's really hard pressed to pick one. But just going along your line around, Forbes 30 Under 30, right? I think one thing that's really exciting, especially in Southeast Asia, is really the whole SME digitization and the digitization of rural economy, really driven by the young population, right? Driven by a growing digital economy, a young workforce in Southeast Asia. Anything that's really a software catering to a unique interaction paradigm in this region and driving digital adoption across enterprises, that's something that I think we see a lot and is still very much needed. And so there's going to be a lot of growth coming out from here. One of our founders, actually, Liris, she is a founder based in Yogyakarta in Indonesia, one of the co-founders of Jala Tech, which is an agriculture tech startup in Indonesia. They basically use IoT water monitoring, data analytics system to achieve precision farming and really improve shrimp production using data-driven farming. All this will serve to increase farmer profitability and sustainability. We have another founder, he was last year's Forbes 30 Under 30, Zach. He founded Kerlek in Malaysia. It's a fintech company making it easier for businesses of all sizes, particularly small businesses, right, to collect recurring payments and take control of their cash flow. So using all this technology, all this data, insights, sensors, IoT, and all that to allow people to take control back, I think that's really something that we want to see more of. We are seeing more of, and it's something that we feel is really impactful in the region.
Thank you, Eileen. This is very inspirational. And to all our audience out there, everyone has an equal chance with the new technology landscape in the market. Everyone can be a Forbes Under 30 from that perspective. Can I say that, recently, I think Adrian and Jimmy talks a lot about how you transition to a mobile workforce during the COVID season. As we maybe take a little bit of a lens, recently, again, I read an article on Forbes and it talks about the future of work is a liquid workforce, how the blurring of physical and virtual, the partnership between man and machine, and more importantly, it's breaking down the old rule book of how we hire, retain, and inspire talent. Maybe can we hear just a quick view from Adrian, on this aspect of talent and the liquid workforce?
Yeah. Again, I think it's going to happen, Sherry. I think this is also going to be a major disruptor as companies probably wants to go more from a fixed cost to a variable cost in terms of their workforce to look at the changing needs of the organization. Plus the fact working from home allows people to, and things like autonomous and all that, the doing is going to be done by machines. People is all about knowing. And knowing means you can work from home, means you can work everywhere and anywhere, or perhaps you can even work with multiple companies. So the kind of notion of somebody working for a single person, I think is going to change. In trading terms, from a long-term contract to a shorter-term contract, I think that's what's going to happen to the workforce.
Very nice. Thank you. Jimmy, how about you?
What I'd like to do is to put a ESG spin on this question. And really, I think if you think about workforce, from the social perspective, I think one of the things that we realize, in the course of actually enabling people to work from home, is the fact that, a lot of the jobs to be done can be done anywhere, right? And if you think about it, and what we're currently doing is to actually automate it in such a way that all the processes are really commoditized into chunks of work. And the ability for us to do that, it means that people can work from home anywhere. And if you actually think about the power of that, what that means is that people who are homebound, for whatever reason, it could be because they have to take care of an aged parent, they could because they have to take care of their kids, or because they are physically challenged and not be able to actually move and travel. Maybe what we realize is that the ability for us to actually harness the talents and the pool of these people and be able to get them back into the workforce, especially for women. To me, it's a very powerful idea and concept that we're actually striving to achieve. If you actually were to think about this liquid workforce, not just the gig economy or the gig workers, but everybody who can actually contribute to the entire productive economy. To me, that in essence is a more powerful concept rather than just thinking about the talents and the workforce.
Thank you, Jimmy. I like your perspective about tapping on the gig workforce as well as women, and all with this open mindset. We enlarge your talent pool, and you're able to bring in a more diverse and inclusive workforce, expanding the ability to tap greater talent pool. So thank you for that. Eileen, maybe a word as you work with multiple governments and corporations on this concept of liquid workforce.
Yeah, I think we've always believed this, right? Talent is everywhere, but opportunities isn't, and hence we are really global and we invest everywhere. Now, with this current shift, I think what we are seeing is that talent is everywhere, and now innovation opportunities can be everywhere too. So it's making new market exploration easier for startups. It's making new market expansion easier for them. And on the other hand, it also means it's making it easier for corporates to look for innovation that's not in their own country itself. Right? Localization is still going to be key, but in terms of really just exploration and finding out new partners and sourcing for new technologies out there, we're definitely seeing a rise in that because the barriers and the borders are all already down. I also think that it means that it's going to be more critical for individuals and businesses in every country to actually stay competitive and relevant given this current movement itself. And, I think Jimmy mentioned a little bit about gig economy. There's another one that I think brings it all together as well. It's called the creator economy. I think that really ties into how the next generation is looking at taking back control and, creating impact wherever they are.
I love this conversation, how each of our leaders are showing the openness of mindset and the opportunities are everywhere. Like you said, Eileen, now opportunities is everywhere and beautiful coupled with, talent is also everywhere. As we draw this conversation to a close, I think a lot of us is going to be looking to leaders like yourself to help us, get a glimpse of your crystal ball. What are you really looking at for the future? What is the moonshot that you will be investing in as you look into the future and plant seeds that maybe none of us may harvest? So with that, we will draw our conversation to a close. Maybe Jimmy, what moonshots are you investing?
Well, I think DBS is in the third wave of our transformation, and we call it the sustainability wave. And a lot of the work that we're doing is towards enabling, the ESG agenda, financial inclusion, and as I mentioned earlier on, some of the work that we're doing, in terms of the social impact. I think over the next this particular wave, I think what you will see is that finance and banking is going to be a lot more proactive in this particular area.
Thank you, Jimmy. Eileen?
Yeah, I think in terms of we invest in a lot of things. So, in terms of sustainability, any solutions that drive inclusion, definitely part and parcel. But if I were to talk specifically about moonshot, right, it will be the creator economy or passion economy. I think that is the future of work. To give you an example, I shared this rise with my daughter who's 15, and she was super excited because she said that's the kind of workforce that she wants to work in. So we're talking about products and services that help creators manage distribution, monetize, so that they can focus on creating itself for their fans. And I think in Southeast Asia, one of the most socially and internet connected regions in the world with a young population, I think content creation is becoming highly sought after, and that's probably the future of what we would want to invest in.
Very nice. I love the creators economy. We're all looking forward to that, where everyone has a role, everyone can participate. Adrian, how about you?
Well, I think for Petronas, our focus will be on three-pronged. One is really on revenue, productivity, and making better decisions and having better line of sight in our current operations. The second prong is really about utilizing digital and technology to perhaps create new revenue streams beyond hydrocarbon. And then the third one is about sustainability. And this one is really about energy transition, reducing carbon for our, and also things like HSE and work safety at the workplace. In particular, combining all this is, for example, things like remote autonomous, offshore machines, IoTs, and we created just one project, for example, using AI, and we harness the kind of knowledge of previous plant startups, and because of that, we achieved the fastest startup in the last 17 years. And because of this, we save carbon, we save money, we get better profit. So that's the three-pronged strategy for us, Sherry, in terms of digital.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super inspired by, hearing from our leaders. While we are actually dealing with the dire state of the economy, of the health crisis, and the accelerated speed of change, it's really heartening to hear that every industry is open to reimagine, every industry is reinvented. I'm just sitting here thinking that at this very, very simple onset, it could be just all of us sitting in a driverless taxi, where before we get into the taxi, the music is there, tuned for you, the temperature as you hop into the car, or even, in Petronas Arena, how you can mix people who are remote and bring them through virtual reality into the oil fields and provide that expertise, an environment where we are seeing how the spatial webbed environment is going to bring our real world and the digital world together. I would say that, we could be, to Eling's point, the creators economy, where you don't need to, you just focus on creating and content, developing good content that will have the world as your market. So we talk about a lot of things about what technology can make possible, but more importantly, the open mindset, the change in our culture perspective, and the responsibility that leaders like yourself have on sustainability, building an inclusive environment, and that we are all looking out to customer centricity. How can we better serve our customers and the citizens out there? So today, I just want to say thank you, Adrian, Jimmy, and Eling, for intriguing us with your vision and leadership. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this panel on innovation and industry transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Jimmy, Adrian, Eling, and Sherry. Love the way you put it, that 1 + 1 is no longer 2, but 1,000 in this fast-moving digital world. And it's great to see a shift towards customer centricity that is so important for a better experience. Now, before we head onto the last segment of the program, that is our solution sessions from our technology partners, let's call upon Pak Haris Ismi, President of Microsoft Indonesia, to close the plenary session. But before that, please do share with us your experience by scanning the QR code or by clicking the link shared in the chat.
Good day, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I hope all of you have had a great time watching the amazing panelists, and we hope you had much to take away from these conversations. It is great to see the broader agreement from the government leaders and private sector about the need for countries and our society to embrace digital innovation. And it's encouraging to see how Singapore has come a long way in its Smart Nation agenda and created that connected citizen experience by providing integrated e-government services for virtually everything. Empowering nation is a collaborative mission that involves public and private sectors to come together, as many of our panelists have emphasized today. And it is inspiring to hear from Pak Eric on how Indonesia is progressing on that mission with organizations such as Telkomsel that is spurring growth for local businesses, and Biopharma using technology to accelerate vaccine distribution in the country. As Satya said, digital technology is the new currency, driving every organization's resilience as well as growth. We need to have that strong digital foundation, and the APAC Cybersecurity Executive Council announcement is timely and critical on how we support each other in building a resilient cyber defense and a strong foundation to digital nations. Tomorrow will be an equally exciting day with Brad Smith, President of Microsoft, talking about what the future might look like with, and then how our amazing panelists will go deeper into the future of society, the future of cities and smart nations, and how we can all build towards a greener, more sustainable world. Look forward to see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Haris. Please join us for the upcoming technology partner sessions. Do check the chat window for the Teams links.
And with that, thank you for your time, and we will see you tomorrow.